Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show. Watch out for yourself. The Sword Sage of the Storm was very clear on the severity of his injuries. He was hit by the claws of the salamander, which contained a venom that was 100 times more potent than that of a manticore's tail. Even though he was a legendary powerhouse, he could only use his combat energy to suppress the venom. As for the rest, he would have to wait till he returned to Alana and search for a remedy at the Pharmacists' Guild. In fact, he could only go to the Pharmacists' Guild. Other than those greedy old fellas at the Pharmacists' Guild, there was no cure for the salamander's venom. No matter how wise a doctor, a priest, or a mage was, they would be helpless in the face of salamander's venom. Even though this young mage standing in front of him had a mysterious origin, but the Sword Sage of the Storm believed that he was not mysterious enough to have the cure for the salamander's venom. "You can't help me," the Sword Sage of the Storm shook his head. "Try drinking it." Linley smiled, and did not explain further. He only took out a glass bottle and tossed it over. "If it really doesn't work, just take it as a fruit juice. After all, it is pretty sweet." The Sword Sage of the Storm caught the bottle and was about to ask Linley to stay when he heard a roar coming from a distance. He saw that the salamander had charged over like wind, bringing along a red afterimage. Its target was the young mage that had added on to its injuries. In an instant, the venomous front claws and numerous scales that no longer radiated red light under the sunlight closed in. Facing this abrupt change, even the composed Sword Sage of the Storm had a change in his expression. "Careful." The members of the 6 Great Mercenary Corps had also simultaneously cried out in alarm. Serena's eyes were wide open and her face was panic-stricken. Aragon was anxious. He wanted to rush over and pull Linley away. Even the one that trusted Linley the most, Hank, had finally started panicking. He covered his mouth with both of his hands and shouted frantically at the faraway Linley, "Watch your back." After tossing the glass bottle to the Sword Sage of the Storm, Linley left without even turning over. After he heard the sounds coming from behind, without even blinking, he shouted at Sean and Argus, "Hey, you two. Start packing up, we're going back to Alana." "Oh," Sean replied obediently, and started packing up. "You. Hurry and look behind you." Argus was as panic-stricken as though he had seen a ghost. He was stuttering while pointing towards Linley's back. "Just a salamander, is there a need for you to be so scared?" Linley mumbled to himself, and he did not even turn around to take a look. The salamander was getting faster and faster. It stuck close to the floor and slid over 100 meters with swish like a red shadow. "You're a pig," Serena harshly scolded. She could not tolerate it anymore, and shut both her eyes. It was over. It was completely over. At such a short distance, it'd only take a second with the salamander's speed and it could rip him apart with its sharp claws. At that point, whatever Archmage it was would also have to go to heaven. Boom. Just when everyone thought his fellow was dead, there was a loud sound from far away. Following that, there was a brilliant explosion of red from the salamander's body. It was like a mist that had pervaded everyone's vision. The scorching temperature immediately permeated everywhere, causing everyone to feel the heat. What followed immediately was a POM. There was a dazzling flare rushing into the skies, which made the pervading red mist abnormally impressive. Suddenly, the whole of Fire Plume Ridge had quietened down. It was as though something had sucked away all the noise. The Sword Sage of the Storm froze, Argus froze, everyone in the 6 Great Mercenary Corps froze. Nobody knew what had happened, and nobody knew what had made it happen. Why did the raging salamander collapse for no apparent reason? Some of them even rubbed their eyes furiously to make sure that it was not a hallucination. Indeed, it was no hallucination. The salamander had collapsed. What the hell? Serena opened her eyes nervously, and yet she witnessed this strange scene. Instantly, she was in daze. She was in daze for a minute before she furiously grabbed Aragon's throat. "Tell me, what happened?" Aragon's eyes were glazed, he stared at the burning flames. He did not even feel Serena grabbing his throat. Only after a while, he finally squeezed some words from his throat. Sala. The salamander has been burned to death. Burn your **s. Serena was close to kicking his face. What a mess. Salamander getting burned to death, why don't you say that a fish is drowning? It's true. Aragon gasped heavily. He recounted what had happened to Serena during that short period. After listening to Aragon's recount, Serena's eyes became wider and wider. She could not believe that it was true. According to what Aragon said, the salamander's body had suddenly caught on fire, and it got burned to death by its own flames. What a joke. A salamander was a fire spirit, it was born with the power to control flames. Strolling in magma and showering in blazing fires was as natural as breathing for it. Wasn't it too preposterous to say that it got burned by its own flames? Yet, Aragon was speaking with certainty. She had no choice but to believe it. Serena refused to drop the matter and asked again, the salamander really got burned to death by its own fire? Really, Aragon nodded his head. Honestly, if it was not because he'd seen it with his own eyes, he himself would not have believed what he had just said. What happened just now was something one wouldn't have imagined. It was like magic. Salamander had surged over with an afterimage, and just when it was about to stretch out its claws, it had suddenly started burning without any reason. A loud sound followed closely, and its whole body had been blown into a mist of blood. Serena bit her lips and thought for a while, before speaking again. Aragon, do you think it was done by that guy? This? Oh, yes, that guy seemed to have thrown something into the salamander's mouth just now. Could it be poison? Serena's head was full of questions. She was about to lose her sanity from this abnormal situation. Rather than saying that she was asking Aragon, it would be more befitting to say that she was talking to herself. Aragon sneakily curled his lips, and thought, only your poison can cause explosions. While both of them were mumbling, the other mercenary corps had started discussing simultaneously. There was only one topic in their discussion, and it was about who that young mage was. To these adventurers of the 6 great mercenary corps, Linley was an unfamiliar face. Nobody knew where he came from, and nobody knew why he would appear here. The scariest thing was that this fella managed to cause the salamander to self-destruct. Just how great was this injustice? Yes, those few from the Red Dragon Mercenary Corps knew. Even though they knew, would they dare to say it? The origin of this chapter's debut can be traced to N0V3LB1N. The Sword Sage of the Storm had already stood up. His hand still held on to that glass bottle, and the stopper had been removed. A thick and viscous black liquid was emanating a thick and foul smell. The Sword Sage of the Storm tried to bring this weird bottle of liquid to his nose, and it was so pungent that he immediately frowned. He really found it hard to believe that this bottle of liquid that looked more poisonous than the salamander's poison could help him, just like what the young mage had said. But the scene from before made the Sword Sage of the Storm have no choice but to believe it. Furthermore, he himself was a legendary-level powerhouse. His insights were much deeper than Serena's. He had no need to suspect Linley. Just by his instincts alone, he could tell that the existence of this young mage was the reason why the salamander had died to its own flames. On what basis would a person that could kill a salamander just casually use a bottle of potion to trick him? The Sword Sage of the Storm gritted his teeth. Finally, he pinched his nose and gulped down that bottle of black liquid. Ugh, when the weird liquid just entered his throat, the Sword Sage of the Storm felt that his whole body was churning. The feeling was worse than receiving a slash from the salamander. It was like soaking a pair of socks that had not been washed for years and then drinking that water. The Sword Sage of the Storm was gagging and drinking at the same time. He had already cursed Linley's ancestors. F***CK. You're really capable, you little **shoal. You can even create such a nasty thing. Did that salamander die of disgust because of this thing? After finishing the bottle with difficulty, the Sword Sage of the Storm did not even have the strength to stand. He threw the bottle and sat on the floor before thinking to himself, F***King Hell, drinking this bottle of liquid was more agonizing than fighting the salamander. At this time, Linley had already kept the mithril pot. He was now bringing Sean and Argus with him to the route to descend from the peak. When he had reached the sword sage of the storm, he looked at the empty bottle on the ground. "You've finished it so quickly? Rest well for these 2 days, drink more water and don't exercise too much. Within 2 days, the toxins in your body will be gone." The sword sage of the storm was vomiting incessantly. When he saw Linley walked over, he wanted to curse and swear at him. Yet, he heard him give an important warning. He immediately shut his mouth. He really could not comprehend what this young mage was thinking. What if that bottle of liquid really could dispel the poison? Could it be that, the sword sage of the storm still wanted to do something stupid like beating up somebody and then knock on his door to apologize after realizing my mistakes? No, I can't do something like that. Linley no longer had any interest in what the sword sage of the storm was thinking. The only thing that interested him now was the charred carcass of the salamander. As the sword sage of the storm was vomiting, he felt something was wrong. He suddenly realized that the toxins in the body started showing signs of disappearing. This sudden realization shocked the sword sage of the storm. That was the salamander's poison we were talking about. Even though he had already used his legendary level combat energy to suppress it, it was still waiting for a chance to cause trouble. With just a little carelessness, it could invade his heart and damage it. But after drinking this thick and viscous black liquid, the toxin suddenly showed signs of softening. The sword sage of the storm knew that he did not have to go to the pharmacist's guild anymore. He was a legendary warrior. A warrior's strongest weapon was his body. Any warrior had a deep understanding of their own body. It was especially so at the realm that Isekaied was in. He would not miss a single minute change, not to mention such a big issue like the salamander's poison. Almost as soon as the toxin started to recede, the sword sage of the storm had already noticed it. This small change made the sword sage of the storm realize that that bottle of black liquid that was making him vomit non-stop really could neutralize the salamander's poison. The young mage had not been lying. For a moment, the sword sage of the storm was in a complete daze. He even started to guess what sort of person this young mage was. An Archmage not even in his 20s could actually neutralize the salamander's poison. A person like this should not be of a low profile. Even if his identity were protected by the Guild of Magic, his name should have been heard of by now. Just thinking about Gryffindor would make sense. A 24-year-old level 14 magic shooter already had the reputation of the #1 genius in Felon. If Gryffindor was the #1 genius in Felon, then what should this young mage in front of him be called? Amryl's #1 magic genius? Just where did this kid come from? The sword sage of the storm had a doubtful and anxious expression. He decided that when he returned to Alana, he would investigate this kid. Just as the sword sage of the storm was being doubtful and anxious, Linley had already walked to the side of the salamander's carcass. Linley glanced at the sword sage of the storm. The expression of the guildmaster had been seen by him. When the sword sage of the storm had a doubtful and anxious expression, Linley knew that that bottle of antidote had already achieved its goal. "Mr. Isekaied, do you mind if I take some things from the salamander's body?" Linley smiled while asking. "No. I don't mind." The sword sage of the storm was stupefied for a moment. Even though he seemed reluctant, he still agreed. There was no choice, he had owed the other party a favor. Even if they wanted to take away the whole salamander, he would not have a way to say no, not to mention a small part of it. As to why the salamander had been killed and why he was still alive, it was thoroughly because of this young mage. If it had not been for his sudden appearance, he would have died to the salamander's claws. As for the adventurers of the 6 great mercenary corps, at most only half of them managed to escape. Furthermore, the other party even took out a bottle of black liquid to help neutralize the salamander's poison. After summing up everything, this favor was even greater than the heavens. With the sword sage of the storm's personality, how could he reject? Heh, then I'll help myself. Linley smiled, and quietly took out the silver knife, which he frequently used from the Ring of Endless Storm. The Sword Sage of the Storm's reaction was well within Linley's calculations. These two favors were really too great. Unless the Sword Sage of the Storm could disregard his reputation and ignore him, there was no way that he would stop him from touching the salamander's carcass. If it was not because he had harbored such thoughts, why would he be so generous? He had no ties to the Sword Sage of the Storm. There was no friendship or animosity between them. Furthermore, the salamander was already dead. He no longer needed the Sword Sage of the Storm's help, and it was not like he had an abundance of herbs in his pockets. Why should he force himself to pretend to be magnanimous? Since the Sword Sage of the Storm had agreed, Linley did not stand on ceremony. He grasped the silver knife taken from the Ring of Endless Storm and slowly walked over to the salamander's carcass. The salamander died in a wretched manner. Its entire body had been cooked. When Linley walked over, he could even smell a thick scent of roasted meat. It was just that when the smell of the roasted meat was mixed with the scent of blood, it became unbearable. When Linley just walked over, it was so pungent that he pinched his nose. "I will never eat roasted meat again." Linley frowned. He used the small silver knife in his hand to slash gently and cut open the salamander's abdomen. He then pulled down along this hole, and opened up a large opening in the salamander's abdomen. Of all the magical beasts that Linley had seen, the salamander was a very special species. Their magical crystals were not the same as those of the other magical beasts that grew on their heads, but instead grew in the chest like a heart. This allowed the powerful power of fire to flow through the entire body along the circulation of blood. Linley had experience killing a salamander before. Even though he was now in another world, he was still very familiar with the extraction of the magical crystal. The silver knife in his hands easily went through the sutures of the salamander and followed an invisible line, which easily opened the salamander's thoracic cavity. The entire process seemed to be completed with a single stroke, and was as smooth as a butcher with tens of years of experience at work. Once he had the salamander's crimson magical crystal in his hand, Linley kept his silver knife with satisfaction. He used his hands to wipe off the blood and dust, and then placed it against sunlight to admire it. When the salamander's magical crystal was in his hands, Linley could clearly feel a faint warmth being emitted from the magical crystal. It was gentle and peaceful, completely different from when the salamander was alive, filled with a violent and murderous aura. It was a priceless treasure. When a magical crystal reached the legendary level, its value could no longer be quantified with gold. It was impossible to find an adventurer that could hunt legendary magical beasts, no matter how many gold coins were offered. Such a rare magical crystal could only be traded for with other goods within a small circle. Linley had had a plan once, but he'd given up on it. Although the Ring of Endless Storm contained a lot of treasures, he could trade only a few items among them for a legendary magical crystal. For example, something like the divinity medal. However, he hated to use the divinity medal to trade for a legendary magical crystal. Hence, Linley could only drool all the while. Until today, he'd finally found a chance when the 6 great mercenary corps encircled and suppressed the salamander. As the saying went, an opportunity only presented itself to those who were prepared. Linley was rejoicing because he was prepared. The various herbs within the Ring of Endless Storm allowed Linley to concoct the various potions to deal with the salamander. This was the most crucial part of this battle. The ingestion of these 10 or more bottles of potions made the salamander self-destruct. If this were to be spread, it might make people feel that this skill, the legacy of the High Elves, was too monstrous. Presumably, only Linley knew it. If this matter were to be disclosed, it actually was not worth a single penny. Even if he did not have a skill that was the legacy of the High Elves, he could still achieve his goal. It was just that it would be slightly more complicated compared to using potions. The unique position of the salamander's magical crystal had already determined its miserable fate. Its immense power of fire came from the magical crystal at the heart. Once it was gravely injured, the power of fire contained within the magical crystal would become unstable. Therefore, it had no choice but to retract its power of fire to prevent itself from inflicting injury upon itself. When the salamander was in such a condition, it would become very dangerous. If anything that could ignite the power of fire within itself were to happen, it would be burnt alive by itself, and Linley manipulated it using this point. All of the tens of bottles of high-level potions were meant to buff every single elemental power. One of them was even a master-level atomic energy potion. It was used for increasing the explosive power of the elemental power. The salamander was already in a dangerous condition. Its power of fire was seriously unstable. It just had to drink tens of bottles of elemental power-enhancing potions, so how could it not be unlucky? Furthermore, within those tens of bottles of potions, there was an atomic energy potion that was used for raising the explosive power of elemental energy. That was the real killer. For mages, a bottle of Potion of Fury could instantly boost the combat power by a level. It could allow a magic shooter to have the power of an Archmage. Even though it lasted only for a short period, the power released during that time could only be described as horrific. As legendary magical beast, the power of fire that the salamander had released during that instance should not belong to Amril. It was not a god. How could it survive under such circumstances? One had to admit, Linley had picked up a heavenly bargain. The Sword Sage of the Storm's fight to the death had brought about a rare chance for Linley. With the ingestion of the tens of bottles of high-level potions, it had immediately sent the salamander to heaven. A thing like luck is really hard to explain. After placing the salamander's magical crystal into the ring of endless storm, satisfied, this fella even shamelessly sighed. The Sword Sage of the Storm saw him take out the silver knife and watched him cut open the salamander's abdomen before finally extracting the crimson-red magical crystal. It truly was so heartbreaking that he almost teared up. Although this was not the true objective behind his attempt to hunt the salamander, who wouldn't be interested in a legendary-level magical crystal? It was a priceless treasure. It even had a chance of being traded with Aldwin for the key to Osric's mausoleum. Unfortunately, this priceless treasure fell into the hands of this young mage in the end. He could not even breathe a word about it, because it had already been settled previously. The other party wanted to extract something from the salamander's carcass, and no matter what it was going to be, he could only watch. With the Sword Sage of the Storm's current position, he would not do something like going back on his words. Let's go, back to Alana. After obtaining a magical crystal for no reason at all, Lin Li's mood could not be any better. Even the prisoner, Argus, stood to gain something from it. Lin Li affectionately patted him on the shoulder, and said, "Let's have a good chat while we are on the road. I have a few questions to ask you. If you can answer them properly, I will release you once we reach Alana." Yes, I will definitely answer properly." Argus was surprised. He had never thought that this guy would actually become so easy to talk to. To be able to escape after answering a few questions. Where could such good deal be found? The three of them went past the corpse of the salamander and walked towards the route for descending the mountain. "Hold up, kid." The Sword Sage of the Storm was feeling sorry about the salamander's magical crystal, and then he suddenly saw these few fellas trying to leave, so he hurriedly shouted at them. "Mr. Alakir, is there something wrong?" Linley was smiling, but he reminded himself that this was a legendary powerhouse. Even if he was still poisoned by the salamander, he was somebody that he, who'd just broken through the Archmage realm, could go up against. If this old man were to turn against him, it would mean serious trouble. Even though, judging by the Sword Sage of the Storm's position, he most likely would not do something like that. However, in some situations, it was better to be more careful. Therefore, when Linley stopped, even though his face was filled with smiles, his mana had already been raised to the max. "Kid, there's no need to be so nervous." Linley's body was filled with mana. The intense magical wave could be felt from far away. How could a veteran like the Sword Sage of the Storm not know what he was thinking about? Immediately, he smiled in a very friendly manner to show that he did not have any animosity. "Guildmaster, how can I help you?" Linley did not take it lying down. I don't care if you have any animosity, let's distance ourselves from this dangerous person first. He smiled while talking, and also moved back at the same time. After finishing this sentence, he had already shifted back more than 10 steps. Let me say this, kid, can you not be so nervous? The sword sage of the storm felt like both crying and laughing. He had lived for almost 100 years, and had never experienced something like this. He had been seen as a weird old man trying to trick a kid with lollipops. To prove that he did not harbor any ill intentions, the sword sage of the storm took more than 10 steps back before the other party did. Only then did he ask Linley from afar, I just wanted to ask if you are from the Pharmacists Guild? No. Linley shook his head straightforwardly. He did not wait for the sword sage of the storm to question him further, and took Sean and Argus with him to the route to descend the mountain. The sword sage of the storm was dazed for a while, and suddenly touched his face before asking himself in an uncertain manner, am I really that scary? The members of the 6th Great Mercenary Corps only returned to their normal state when Linley's party had descended the mountain. Today had been too stimulating for them. They had seen the legendary salamander and a person that could kill the legendary magical beast with their own eyes. Serena commanded her subordinates to clear the battlefield while thinking to herself. She had always felt that the fella together with Linley had always been somewhat familiar. Oh my god. That's Argus. It was only after a full 10 minutes that Serena finally remembered. In an instant, her expression could only be described as unusually brilliant. The three of them took a break at Black Hills Town, and hired a carriage there. By the time they had returned to Alana, it was already in the afternoon on the second day. During this long journey, Argus said everything. The situation was similar to Linley's conjecture. The reason as to why Argus became his opponent was all because of Matthias' actions. It had not been suggested by Wilhelm, nor did it have any support from anyone within the family. It was purely because he could not let it go and wanted his life. This result made Linley somewhat more relaxed. At least, judging from their talk just now, the Marathon family was not preparing to do anything against him. If it was only Matthias, there was no need to worry, because this fellow was too stupid. He made such a mess out of an assassination plan. If it weren't because Argus had been lucky and caught him in the cave trying to gather Black Lotus, why would the journey thereafter have become so dangerous? Now, he had 4 Black Lotus on hand, and the power of an Archmage. If Matthias were to act against him, he would have to ask a legendary mage for help. Yet, after the talk, Argus also confirmed one thing. Wilhelm was indeed angry. This was the only thing that made Linley somewhat worried. Wilhelm's attitude also signified the attitude of the Marathon family. Just a single Matthias would not amount to anything. From Linley's perspective, he was just an useless blockhead at the very most. If he wanted to go against Linley, he would have to mature more. On the flip side, if it was the whole Marathon family, then it would spell trouble. The power of the Marathon family was too immense. Even if Linley was protected by the Guild of Magic, they would still have a chance. Okay, Argus. You may leave. The carriage stopped in front of the Guild of Magic, and Linley let Argus go very willingly. Ah? Argus was dazed for a while. What's there to awe about? Why aren't you leaving? Could it be that you're still waiting for me to treat you to dinner? I really can leave? Argus could not believe it. This fella actually let him go so easily. Although this guy had mentioned it earlier at the Fire Plume Ridge that if he were to cooperate, he would be released. However, with this guy's personality, what it meant to release him had to include some machinations. For example, getting cursed, poisoned, or something. It could also be getting some form of evidence that he had betrayed the Marathon family so that he had no other choice but to listen to Linley. In fact, Argus had long been prepared for this. He had already submitted to fate. In any case, this young mage called Felik was also a powerful person, having the power of an Archmage at such a tender age and the knowledge of the mysterious pharmaceutics. Listening to a person like this was not something shameful. To be precise, it promised a better future than listening to Matthias. He had already thought about how to show his loyalty and win the other party's trust. Who knew this was going to be the result? This guy actually released him the moment he opened his mouth. He did not cast any curse or poison him. He did not even try to blackmail him. This. Isn't this too disrespectful? At any rate, I used to be a Archmage, and you let me go just like this? Argus was a little disappointed. Linley did not care whether he was disappointed or not. He chased him off the carriage with just a few words. What a joke. It's not like I have nothing better to do. What's the point of taking in a burdensome person like you? For now, it's just Matthias' own actions. If I really were to take you in, I'm afraid the Marathon family would send men over to F***ck me up. Also, you should look at the mirror. Can't you see that you have the word traitor written all over your face? You are the traitor of the Marathon family. If I really were to bring you into the Guild of Magic, who knows what would Wilhelm think? Sending an Archmage to assassinate me is a small issue. What I am afraid of is that he might have issues with Guild of Magic and think that the Guild of Magic might be attempting something against the Marathon family. Once that happens, two powerful forces will clash together. The Adventurers Guild that always had eyes on the key to Osric's mausoleum might interfere as a third party. This will result in a bloodbath in Alana. How would I, the instigator, feel? I can't do this, I definitely can't. Linley sent Argus off in a manner that was similar to sending off the god of plague. Linley only felt relieved and got off the carriage after seeing Argus leave. He brought Sean with him into the guild hall. Felix. Just as he had entered the guild hall, he heard Mason's voice coming from afar. Morning, Brother Mason. What a coincidence. Linley looked into distance and saw Mason coming over from the corridor with Oren. It seemed like these two were not slacking off either. They should have spent most of their time reading at the Omniscient Tower. The three of them started catching up after not seeing each other for a few days before they started walking outside. Once they were on the road, Mason managed to find the time to ask Linley about his harvest. How was it? Was it smooth sailing at the Fire Plume Ridge? It can be considered smooth, Linley was not too sure. In fact, he himself was unsure whether this was considered smooth going. The rewards for this trip to the Fire Plume Ridge had far exceeded his expectations. Not only had he successfully gathered Black Lotus, he had also obtained a floating fortress from the Dark Ages and a legendary level magical crystal. On the other hand, there were quite a few issues. First of all, he had to duel with an Archmage, and in the middle of it, he had encountered a disaster-like earthquake. As for entering the Gates of Ashes, something like going to the Eternal Furnace could only be considered a small interlude. The real climax would be killing the salamander. It might seem like smooth sailing, but it actually had been as dangerous as walking on a steel wire. With just a small mistake back then, it would most likely be Linley's ashes that were sent back to Alana now, not he himself. Luckily, each of those times were threatening, but not overly dangerous. Hence, it could still be considered smooth sailing. What have you guys been up to? Still going to the Omniscient Tower every day? No. I only use half of a day to read books now. Mason's face was boastful. Linley was curious. Then what about the other half? I use the rest of time to educate an idiot. After Mason said that, he looked at Oren with eyes full of provocation. Linley almost fainted from fear because of him. He distinctly remembered that before he had left Alana, this guy had just reached the magic shooter realm, and Oren had already reached the peak of level 12. It was not just a level in power. What did he use to educate others? His finger. Felix, you must know that people always improve. You can ask him who educated whom if you don't believe it. For real? He won. Oren's words were short like in the past, but after he finished, he added another 2 words. 1 round. What, 1 round doesn't count as winning? Mason did not bother refuting, he just showed off proudly, and shamelessly added another sentence. I've decided that I will not duel with you anymore. I want to keep this victory for an eternity, idiot. Oh, yes, Mr. Fellick. The three of them returned to the living quarters, and just as they sat down on the rattan chairs, Mason suddenly remembered something. I've heard from the old man that somebody was looking for you yesterday afternoon. Somebody was looking for me? Was it an old man? Linley thought hard about it. The people that he was familiar with in Alana were just a few. Among them, more than half of them were at the Fire Plume Ridge. Other than that, only Old Graham and Andoin might look for him. Furthermore, out of these two old men, Old Graham was the most likely one. It was because when Linley had left, he had promised him that he would go to the Pharmacists' Guild to join some event when he returned. After calculating the time, it could be that the old man could not wait any longer these 2 days and decided to come to Guild of Magic. I don't think so. Mason thought about it. What he said next was far beyond Linley's expectations. I've heard the old man say that it was somebody young. Like, in the 20s or 30s. 20s or 30s? Yes. Mason thought for a long before he remembered. He's called Kevin. Yes, yes, yes. It's Kevin. Where is he? Linley had a shock. I'm not too sure. Why don't you ask the old man? He might know a thing or two. Yes, I will go find him right now. Once he'd heard that Kevin had actually came to Alana, Linley immediately could not sit still. He did not care about the exhaustion from the trip. After he hurriedly settled down Sean, he rushed over to search for Kevin. Linley jogged over to the guild hall, went through the long corridor, and was knocking on Macklin's door before long. Come in. Linley gently pushed open the door, and immediately saw the sheepish face of Macklin. Mr. Macklin, I've heard somebody was looking for me. After Linley entered the room, he did not bother being polite, and went straight to the point. Yes. Macklin nodded. 2 days ago, a mage called Kevin came looking for you. He said he was Jirian's nephew, coming from Josus. Where is he now? He is at the guild's guest room. I'll get somebody to bring you there in a while. No need, I'll go over myself. Linley shook his head and rejected Macklin's kind intentions. As of now, he could not even wait for a single minute, much less a while. Linley clearly remembered that before he'd left, Kevin had always been garrisoned at the Demon Fall Valley. For the Josus Guild of Magic, the Demon Fall Valley was their lifeline. It was the root of the Josus Guild of Magic. If it was not because something big had happened, why would Kevin come over to Alana to look for him? And if he came to Alana, who would be defending the Demon Fall Valley? Could it be that Jirian went over? Something must have happened at Josus, and it's not something ordinary. Fellick, wait, Linley had just stood up when he got stopped by Macklin. I have something to discuss with you. Now is not the time. Let's discuss it when I get back, Linley said while he rushed off. When he reached the guest room of the guild, he saw Kevin pacing around the room anxiously. The Archmage who was responsible for taking care of Kevin was called Stilton. Before Linley went to the Shadowglen for the trial, he'd met him twice. Linley knew that he was an important figure in Alana Guild of Magic, and was comparable to Darien in terms of the status. Although Macklin had not said much, he was indeed concerned with this matter. Mr. Stilton, could you tell me when would Fellick be back? The Archmage hesitated. To be honest, I'm not sure as well. I only know that his mentor is Mr. Macklin. Apart from him, we do not have the right to ask about his whereabouts. But, Kevin paused, and was unusually jittery. Good afternoon, Mr. Stilton. Linley greeted the good-natured Archmage the moment he entered the room. Then, he turned towards the other man. It's been a while, Kevin. A long time no see. Kevin was elated upon seeing Linley. When did you come back? Fellick, you are finally back. Your friend has been waiting for 2 days here. If not, I would need to go and pester Mr. Macklin for you, Stilton joked while he walked towards the door. All right, I will go and attend to my matters now. Have a nice day. Goodbye, Mr. Stilton. After sending Stilton away, Linley turned to look at Kevin. He asked worriedly, Kevin, what happened? Something horrible has happened, replied Kevin. It had only been a month since Linley last saw him. Kevin looked much more pallid than before, and his hair looked like a mess, eyes bloodshot. We've lost the Demon Fall Valley. Linley frowned. Still, he was not shocked by this sudden news. Before he came, he had already prepared himself mentally. Since Kevin appeared at Alana, it meant that something had happened in Josus. It would not be a small matter, or the stubborn Jirian would not have allowed Kevin to come Alana to look for him. At the start, he thought that it was Jirian whom had gotten into trouble. Thankfully. Although the Demon Fall Valley was important, losing it was not a great deal. They could just get it back when he was free. So, he asked in a low voice, did Shadow's Nest do it? Yes, Kevin nodded, and leaned against the chair weakly. They attacked the Demon Fall Valley within 1 month after you left. Their attacks have always been rather frequent. Why did the defense force fail this time? Linley asked doubtfully. Everyone in Josus knew that the Shadow's Nest had been vying for the Demon Fall Valley and would be sure to plan their attacks every month. To put it in Jirian's words, those attacks were much more punctual than Old Merlin's period. As for whether Old Merlin had any period, we could discuss it next time. The Shadow's Nest had never succeeded in any of their raids throughout these 10 years. How did they do it this time round? This time, Kevin hesitated, not knowing where to start. After a minute, Linley heard his voice again. This time was different, their attack was much stronger than before. If I did not recognize a few familiar faces, I would have thought that it was a different force that attacked the Demon Fall Valley. Stronger attack? Linley was stunned for a moment, but regained his composure immediately. He clarified, you meant they had better equipment? There were 2 sides to a stronger attack. First, it would be an upgraded set of skills. Second, the enhancement of equipment. In a battle that hundreds of thousands of people participated, unless there was a suppression to everyone's level, the level of any individual would be meaningless. Furthermore, breakthroughs were not to be achieved in the matter of days. How would so many people experience that together? The most direct and effective method was still to make changes to the equipment. Especially for people of lower levels, a trashy outfit and an outfit of superior quality would mean 2 different things. For example, if you gave a mage who had just surpassed level 5 10 scrolls, 10 recovery potions, and a robe of the void, he would be able to kill at least 10 other mages of a similar level extremely easily. Hence, when he heard that the Shadow's Nest had a boost in abilities, the first thing Linley thought of was their equipment. That's right. Kevin nodded with an agonizing expression. I can't believe they had so much magical equipment. Almost everybody had one. Each of them were holding either a frost or a fire shadowbane. It was my first time ever seeing so much magical equipment. And the thing was, they even had a team of warriors dressed in heavy armor. I totally could not tell what metal their armors were made of. They remained unharmed from attacks that were below level 5. They were like monsters. Warriors in heavy armor? Linley paused. Having great knowledge in forging, he knew that magical equipment was of little significance. The names, Frost or Fire Shadowbane, were only superficial fronts. With any piece of scrap metal, he could easily forge magical equipment of similar capabilities. The heavy-armored warriors were the only thing that attracted his attention. The cost of heavy-armored warriors was infamously exorbitant. Not to mention their magical attributes and costly maintenance fees in the future, just a set of delicately forged heavy armor would require at least 10,000 Goan coins. In fact, the budget to develop a heavy-armored warrior would be as much as if he was a mage. In Felon Kingdom, there were as many mercenary corps as the hair on a cow. They were endowed with rich oil resources too. Yet, what could really manage the expenses of the heavy-armored warriors would no doubt only be the Silver Hand. With such a big force, the Silver Hand became one of the 3 great mercenary corps in Alana. However, the Shadow's Nest was considered an inferior force in the Felon Kingdom. What was their motive for doing so? Furthermore, they did not look like the usual heavy-armored warriors. Kevin, were those heavy-armored warriors completely or partially immune to magic of level 5 and below? Think carefully before you answer. It's important. Fully immune, Kevin replied with firmness. I knew it, Linley nodded his head, and said nothing more. Yet, he started to suspect something was amiss. Armor that could protect people from magic below level 5 was nothing to be fancy about, and Linley knew various forging designs that could achieve the same effect, and that was the reason why he was even more suspicious. The few designs he knew of would require the help from high-level blacksmiths. With the inferior status of the Shadow's Nest, how could they have the ability to invite them? Furthermore, those designs were exorbitantly priced, easily at a few 100,000 gold coins. If the Shadow's Nest had so much money, why would they buy for the Demon Fall Valley? They should have run to Josus to rescue the prostitutes there. How's Isra? Linley asked after a while. Kevin was surprised by that random question. How would the occupation of the Demon Fall Valley be even related to Isra's well-being? But after that, he honestly replied, he was not injured, he just had his group of merchants stolen. But, frankly speaking, he made significant contributions. Not to mention that he busied himself to help out with different resources, he's also sent 20 magic shooters from the man's family. If not for him, I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to resist even for a week. 20 magic shooters? Linley nodded, and eliminated his suspicions against Isra. Initially, he'd thought that the man's family had been behind it. Before he'd left Josus, the man's family had been on extremely good terms with the Guild of Magic. Yet although they'd appeared to be as close as family, Linley understood that it was because of the lack of a proper opportunity. Or else, neither the man's family nor Isra would waste the chance to take over Josus. The situation was clear. How could the ability of the Guild of Magic and all the different potions Linley had left behind before he'd left give the Shadow's Nest any chance to succeed? If not for those, Linley would not have left with such a peace of mind. Yet, it had only been 1 month since he'd left, and Kevin came rushing here to announce that the Demon Fall Valley got taken over. Who would believe that no one was supporting the Shadow's Nest? The attack by the Shadow's Nest, this time, had a strong reek of money. Money was needed to forge magical weapons and magical armors. And who was the richest in the whole of Josus? It would undoubtedly be the man's family, or the pretty boy Isra. Hence, the first person that Linley had suspected was Isra. But, from what Kevin told him, it did not seem like it. Isra was a young and able man with good potential. He would not choose to do the silly deed of siding with both the Shadow's Nest and the Guild of Magic at the same time. Even if what Isra did was to gain the trust from the Guild of Magic as a backup plan, it did not make sense to waste so much effort. Furthermore, Josus was not Alana, everyone knew who were the Archmages. After old Merlin disappeared, there was only one Archmage in Josus left, and that man was President Jirian. Archmages were already considered the most influential and powerful people in the country. If Isra was to engage in such an activity, he would have invested everything. Hence, it seemed like he was trustworthy in allying himself with the Guild of Magic, apart from the man's family, who would have the ability to own such wealth. Linley filtered the 17 forces in Josus in his mind, but could not come up with an exact answer. Might it be an external force? Linley asked. The moment he imagined that, he was shocked too. If it was an external party that had been vying for the Demon Fall Valley, things were more complicated. It might make sense for one of the 17 forces within Josus to provide aid to the Shadow's Nest. Regardless of the reason, whether it was to weaken the Guild of Magic, or to claim the chief's seat, it would require a large sum of money. Hence, what would be the motivation of the external force? Even if their attack impacted the Guild of Magic, they would not gain any benefits. The 17 forces had been in the city of Josus, while the Shadow's Nest nearby, for thousands of years, and leadership over the city had continued on a rotational basis. This rotation was like what the High Elves had practiced during the Dark Age. They had been passing down the power of the monarch among the noble descendants of the Sun King. Regardless of how they turned against each other, the person who ultimately got to the seat of the monarch would no doubt be one of those descendants. If his ability could terrify the other nobles, they would be convinced to wait for their next opportunity. If he was not a descendant of the Sun King or a high elf, the consequences would be clear. No high elf would settle for anyone who was not the Sun King's descendant to rule over them. If such a situation were to occur, the entire imperial court of all the high elves would riot with all their might and use whatever means to pull the usurper off the throne. Josus was in a similar situation now. There were too many forces gathered in the small city. From the 6 underground forces to the 11 mage families, none would allow the interference from external parties. If there was an intervention from external forces, they would be more than happy to be the peanut-crunching crowd and wait for the Guild of Magic to fall to its lowest point. After that, they would express their grief at the unfortunate situation while plotting how they could use it to their advantage. However, if that external force were to try to advance into Josus City after weakening the Guild of Magic, the leaders of the 17 other forces would not hesitate to intervene. To reach their hand into the city of Josus would require blood. As for forces that were powerful enough to destroy the 17 forces with a wave of an arm, they would not be interested in Josus. No matter how Linley looked at the situation, it did not seem like there would be involvement from any external party. However, Linley could not think of other reasons after putting aside his suspicion against the other 17 forces and the Shadow's Nest. Unless, the target of the external force was not Josus, but the Demon Fall Valley. If it was so, they would need to reassess that place. An organization would not be interested in taking over the few rare mines and herbs there if they had the ability to supply the Shadow's Nest with so much magical equipment. They would certainly not settle for such little things. How was it in the Guild of Magic? After a moment of silence, Linley asked about the situation in the Guild of Magic. In fact, that was what Linley was truly worried about. To Linley, they could always regain the Demon Fall Valley after losing it when he had the time. He was more concerned with the current state the Josus Guide of Magic was in. Josus Guild of Magic was like his second home. It did not matter whether it was the vulgar Jirian or the composed Kevin, the bootlicking or the timid mages, everyone had become part of his life. If anything were to happen to Josus Guild of Magic, what was the use even if they were to reclaim the Demon Fall Valley later? We've retreated early, so there weren't too many casualties. Where's that old man? Uncle Jirian had been slightly injured, but had recovered more, or less, before I came here. Speaking of that, Kevin's expression was a little unnatural. However, he hid it well. Having lost the Demon Fall Valley, he was already not in good spirits. Even an observant person like Lin Li could not realize his awkwardness. That's good. Linley nodded as he sat down relieved. Kevin, would you be free these few days? Of course. Kevin smiled, but his complexion was still pallid. For our safety, Uncle Jirian wanted me to return to Josus with you after your trial ends. That old man seems rather thoughtful this time round. It was rare for Linley to compliment Jirian. Then let me find you accommodation. We shall head back at the end of the month when things are settled. All right. After chatting with Kevin for a while, Linley finally felt a sense of relief. Thank goodness that they'd only lost one Demon Fall Valley. He regained his composure and brought Kevin out to eat happily. Their attitudes were contradictory. Kevin did not react much to what Linley talked about. At most, he forced out a smile. Kevin, look, could you stop mulling over the Demon Fall Valley? Linley advised while they were on their way back to the Guild of Magic. Wasn't that due to their good magical equipment? Do not worry, I would surely get you heaps of equipment when I get back to Josus. You can decide what to do with it then. Linley was probably the only person that knew the credibility of his words. Magical equipment was nothing special to a freak like him who was proficient in the 5 elemental skills. To exaggerate a little, any scrap metal could turn into quality equipment if he were to touch it with a finger. Linley did not worry about the Shadow's Nest at all. No, Felix. Kevin was still worried. You haven't experienced that battle for yourself. You would not understand how traumatizing the Shadow's Nest's attack was. Never mind, then. Linley stopped persuading him after realizing that he could not speak with such a pessimist anymore. Since there are not many days left, you can stay in Alana with a peace of mind. I will tell you more things when we return to Josus. Alright. When they reached the Guild of Magic, Linley brought Kevin to his apartment and settled him down. After introducing him to Oren and Mason, he went to find Macklin hastily. The reason for doing so was firstly because he'd remembered that the old man had had something to talk to him about before he went to the guild hall. Secondly, it was to help Kevin find a better accommodation. Although the apartment given to him by the Guild of Magic was spacious enough, it would be really packed if both Sean and Kevin were to live there as well. Furthermore, with Sean's snoring being stronger than magic, it was definite that Kevin would not be able to share a room with him. He couldn't let Kevin sleep in the living room like him, right? It did not make sense to do so. Linley saw the old man glaring at him in a bad mood the moment he'd stepped into the room. He could not help but feel guilty at that moment. What's up? What's up? You still dare to ask me that? The old man was so mad that his goat-like whiskers twitched as he spoke. God damn it, you had to make me wait for you the entire afternoon just to discuss something trivial. Where is your humanity? Didn't I come back? Linley was beyond words at the childlike personality the old man had. Come, don't you know that anger is bad for health? Furthermore, for people with status like you have to take note of your image. Understand? Alright, tell me now. I will try my best to help if it is within my ability, Linley comforted Macklin. That makes more sense. After gaining the promise from Linley, Macklin finally smiled with contentment. Actually, there's nothing much. I just wanted to ask if you have confidence in the finals. Finals? Linley was stunned. He did not understand why the old man would talk about this topic all of a sudden. Damn, Macklin cursed. He could not help but feel furious at Linley's aloofness. Then, he looked at Linley earnestly and gave him a tongue lashing. You bastard. Can't you be more concerned with your progress? Look at Gryffindor and Sarson. Which one of them doesn't train from morning till night that they seem as if they hoped to live in the omniscient tower? Even that useless Marson knew the need to work harder. Dude, why could you just leave training for the entire week? Do you still want to win? Why would I not want to? You want to win? Macklin scoffed. Then let me ask you. How many times have you gone to the omniscient tower ever since you got the pass to go there? At that instance, Linley could not help but feel a little guilty. He realized how he had not gone to the omniscient tower ever since he'd got the pass to do so. Yet, no matter how guilty he was not going to admit it. I've gone there many times. How could I even count it? Fine, I'm not going to dig out past matters. Now I'm going to be very serious with you. You're not to go anywhere from tomorrow onwards. Since we still have time, I have to teach you some things personally. Or else, Anduin is going to nag that I'm not being responsible for his disciple. You must put in more effort. Unless you reach the Archmage realm, you have to be with me for a very, very long time. Linley rolled his eyes. He felt embarrassed to tell that old man he'd already reached the realm of the Archmage. What, you're not happy? No. I'm very happy, but I wonder why are you so anxious? You've never pressured me in the past. Freak, how could I not be anxious? Linley's question triggered Macklin's rage. I never knew that Gryffindor dude made it to the realm of the Archmage until today. God damn it, that fella even tried to hide it from me. If I didn't know that, you were going to lose out in the finals. Gryffindor also surpassed the realm of the Archmage? Linley was stunned. Although he'd felt something different from Gryffindor in their last lunch gathering, the man had been still a magic shooter at his peak. Linley could not believe that Gryffindor had made his last step into the realm that most mages dreamed of in such a short period of time. Even Linley felt flabbergasted by the speed he had improved at. It explained Macklin's fury after he knew the news. The progress of Mance was directly related to the reputation of their mentors. If Linley were to lose to Gryffindor, Macklin would not be able to lift his head in front of Gryffindor's mentor. What do you mean by also surpass the realm of the Archmage? Linley's casual inquiry made Macklin curious. I mean, I admire Gryffindor as he is no doubt the top magic genius in the whole of Felon, being able to reach the realm of the Archmage. Linley tried to cover up for himself by diverting the topic. While saying that, he could not help but feel surprised at the number one magic genius of Felon. Admire what sh*t? Macklin cursed with anger immediately. Why should you admire him? I've never seen anyone as talented as you, for all the years I've ever lived. What is Gryffindor, compared to you? When he was at your age, he'd barely surpassed the magic shooter realm. If you put in a little more effort, you will no doubt catch up with him. What crap. Do you think any Tom, Dick, or Harry could become my disciple? If not for your strong potential, I would have chosen to mentor other people, Macklin scolded Linley as he stood up from his chair. Let's go, follow me to the spell testing hall. I need to teach you more things. You don't need to be so much in a rush, Linley rolled his eyes as he followed him to the spell testing hall obediently. Do you think I have a lot of free time like you? Quick, don't dilly-dally. I still have things to do after smacking you. Sure, let's go. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Linley muttered, and walked through the long corridor. While they walked, Linley reminded Macklin about finding a place for Kevin. Accommodation? That's easy. I'll have them settle it later, Macklin promised Linley without further thought. Since the Guild of Magic was so huge, finding accommodation was nothing to him. Even if 10 Kevins needed a place, he would be able to fit them in the guild, not to say one Kevin. Then let me thank you in Kevin's stead. Cut the crap. The old man was not convinced by him. Don't think that I will forgive you if you thank me like that. You are going too overboard these days, worse than that foolish mason. If you are continuing with that, we shall wait and see if you have what it takes to win the finals. But I didn't say I would definitely win. Linley had never seen Macklin utterly concerned with anything before. Even for the trial at the Shadow Glen, he'd only told him to be careful. Linley could not understand why Macklin would be that fixated on winning the finals. To Linley, the finals were just the finals. It would be nice to emerge victorious, but he would not mind if he didn't. Since Gryffindor had become an Archmage as well, there were bound to be a lot of variables in the battle between the two. Although there were similar chances of winning, Linley was not certain that he would win even if he had the confidence. However, that was not the case for Macklin. Damn it, don't you have any goals? The old man paused in his tracks to look at Linley in disdain. Although he felt guilty, Linley was nevertheless stubborn with his words. Why are you looking at me? You also knew that Gryffindor was an Archmage, and I'm not sure if I'm able to defeat him. What uncertainty are you talking about? Macklin pursed his lips scornfully. I'd bet my life that for your current skills, you could just surrender to Gryffindor. You don't even need to fight him. He's too powerful. After all the scolding, the old man suddenly realized his words might be too discouraging. Hence, after thinking for a while, he awkwardly added, but you still have that little bit of advantage by being younger than him by a few years. Linley rolled his eyes, knowing that he was not competing for who the hell had lived longer. All in all, put in more hard work this month. With your potential and my guidance, you'll still have quite a chance. Macklin concluded the discussion on a resolute tone before showing his envy. Damn, you batch of bastards, you are really lucky. Why didn't we have the same treatment when we were younger? To give you people the power to build a new guild. Their brains must be fried. What's there to be jealous about? Linley could not understand what was so attractive about having a new guild that made not only the mages on trial, but also old people like Macklin so fixated on it. They were like wolves seeing meat. To Linley, the leader of the new guild would be like a coolie. Look at what Josus and Alana were like. Building a new guild did not finish overnight. Although Jirian had the strongest magical power and the respect of the whole Josus, he had been oppressed by the 3 big families so much that he could not even raise his head. On the surface, he seemed to have the seat of the ruler, but when was he the most powerful man throughout these 10 years? That being said, even bastard Cromwell dared to visit them, demanding Jirian to do that to Linley. If not for Linley, no one knew how deep the Josus Guild of Magic would continue to be. The rise from nothingness and building up strength were an arduous process. Not to mention other needs, it was a necessity for them to have somewhere to live. Although Josus Guild of Magic was poor, it had an emerald tower. What would become of the new guild? They couldn't let a group of mages sleep on the streets, could they? A library, mediation room, different types of halls, laboratories. How could one be able to list all of them in 1 or 2 lines? Even if the Supreme Council gave their full support, it would never have the power to send a group of archmages as free construction labor, right? Furthermore, who knew where to build the new guild at? Linley had the confidence to maintain it if it was to be built in Josus, where their archmages were all considered to have the highest ranking. However, if it were to be built in a prosperous city like Alana, where legendary figures roamed, Linley would have sleepless nights, fearing that he might unknowingly violate their rights. Wouldn't he die an unjustified death if someone were to kill him silently in the middle of the night? In conclusion, that would be a hard but thankless job. Linley always tried to distance himself from such fruitless matters. To be honest, I'm utterly uninterested in the position as the leader of the new guild. Since he had already begun on this topic, he had no plans to hide his reasons. That is not only an arduous commitment, but also something that would endanger my life. I'm not that silly to fight for such a thankless position. What are you saying? Macklin's eyes widened immediately, and he glared at Linley as though he was a moron. Who told you that you'd waste a lot of energy and put yourself in danger? Do you know what it means to be a guild leader? Linley pursed his lips and sulked. Why would I not know what it entails? I'm going to be the cream inside a sandwich biscuit. Above me would be the Supreme Council, and under me the mages in the guild. Not only that, there's also the lurking forces outside. You know Jirian, from Josus? He's already 60 years old, but still needs to stay at the Demon Fall Valley every day to protect it. He was even injured last month when the Shadow's Nest attacked and took over the Demon Fall Valley. Now tell me, what's worthwhile about that damn position? He's lost the Demon Fall Valley? Macklin laughed suddenly. I was wondering why you are so heated up today. So it's because of that valley. Don't worry, we will not let it happen like that. You could stay in Alana while I send people to Josus tomorrow to stabilize the situation there, then see if we can snatch the Demon Fall Valley back. Then I shall replace Jirian, to thank you. Actually, it was just a casual grumble from Linley. To him, the Josus Guide of Magic was like a second home. He had spent half of his time since he'd entered the world of Amril there. Now, his house was robbed, yet nothing could be heard from the head of the Alana Guild of Magic and the mayor of the Supreme Council. Linley could not help but feel anxious, despite him being a good-natured person. What he did not expect was Macklin's agreeableness when he promised to provide aid to Josus. Honestly speaking, it was not important if they could not reclaim the Demon Fall Valley. It was more vital to stabilize the situation in Josus. Now that they lost the Demon Fall Valley, even fools would know that the heads of the 17 forces were more or less itching for action. If Alana Guild of Magic was willing to provide aid, it would be good news for the Josus Guild of Magic. It would not require much strength as well. 1 to 2 archmages would be enough to hold back the many forces in Josus. As for the Demon Fall Valley, Linley totally could think of a solution after he returned. Cut the crap. My reason for sending aid there is not to help that old Jirian, but to assure you to stay in Alana in peace. If not, I wouldn't have cared about this at all. Alright. I will do my best in the finals that are coming in a month. No matter what he said, he was already going to owe Macklin a favor. He could only promise him temporarily as it would not be nice to persist any further. As for things that were going to happen next month, let us talk about it after that month. Seems like you still don't understand. Forget it, there's not going to be a difference if you understand. You should just know that the seat of the president of Magic Guild is not for anyone. Macklin shook his head. He finally understood that it was meaningless to talk sense into that fella. The most direct and surest way to deal with him was to tell him the benefits of such a position. Temptation of one thing would still be better than 100 principles. Macklin did not nag at Linley further. I wonder if this thing came across your mind before. Have you wondered why the president is always the most powerful person in any guild of magic? Macklin asked while shooting Linley a mysterious glance. How could one become the guild president if he does not have a strong ability? Linley pursed his lips, thinking that Macklin was talking nonsense. Wrong. Macklin exclaimed mysteriously while he stopped in his tracks, and pointed to the president's room far away. Aldwin surpassed the Archmage realm at the age of 46. However, the position he gained was not based on meritocracy. At that time, there were at least 5 mages who were more powerful than him. Isekaied the Supreme Council. You know how they chose the guild president? With a boxing challenge. How absurd is that? 46 years old? Linley was stupefied. He clearly remembered that Mason told him Aldwin had surpassed the legendary realm at the age of 55. If Macklin was saying the truth, does that mean that Aldwin spent only 9 years to progress from an archmage to a legendary mage? Holy! That is a horrifying speed. Linley could not accept the fact that Aldwin had merely spent 9 years to rise to a legendary mage. Linley was an archmage too. How could he not understand how shocking it was to be able to do so? To exaggerate a little, it was as if with the speed of light. Linley swallowed his saliva anxiously. Why you? You mean? President Aldwin only spent 9 years, because of his position? You're not a moron, after all, Macklin commented while he nodded his head. Do you not remember that Herza announced that the new guild president would receive full support from the Supreme Council? What do you think the support is? Really physical resources and manpower? Stop being so childish. I dare to bet my life that the winner of the trial would receive the most mysterious spell, the most profound magical knowledge, and the most powerful magical powers. Even in the Supreme Council, only their core members would be able to enjoy such treatment. Macklin gulped another big mouth of saliva before he continued. In fact, Aldwin's 9 years was nothing at all. I remember that he once told me that in his batch, there was a most freaky mage from the Leaden Kingdom. Wow, that kid was a true beast. He's only used 10 years to become the guild president when he only had the ability of a level 10 magic shooter. Then, he got to the legendary level immediately. Is that true? Linley's eyes widened. Crap, why would I lie to you? Macklin snapped. Then, he continued, but, to be frank, your concern on safety is valid too. Why is that so? Linley asked curiously. He was a little shocked. Why did that old man change his stance out of a sudden? If I didn't guess wrongly, the new region Herza was referring to should be near the breezy plains. So it's there. Linley suddenly was clear on how things stood after listening to Macklin. If it were the breezy plains, his concerns were indeed justified. The breezy plains was a renowned place that even a transmigrator like Linley knew of. The most complicated region of the north of Anril would be the breezy plains. The 2 strongest human kingdoms located in the north of Anril, Felon and Leaden, were situated on the breezy plains. On top of that, together with the dwarf kingdom not far away, as well as the Trahem forest, where elves roamed freely, they were going to make up 4 formidable giants in total. They were like 4 pieces of puzzle that would form the most impenetrable force on the breezy plains. And apart from these 4 greatest influences, there were many other smaller forces. However, if one were to randomly compare one of such forces with those in Josus City, it would be much mightier than Josus' 11 mage families and their 6 underground forces. Unless they had people from the Supreme Council following them around every day, their lives would really be in danger. The breezy plains is actually a very interesting place. If you have time, you can go to the Omniscient Tower to have a look, Macklin said for no rhyme or reason. He ignored Linley after he spoke, and went to the spell-testing hall on his own. How is it interesting? Linley thought about it for a long time, but didn't understand what it meant. When he looked up in puzzlement, he saw that Macklin had already passed through the corridor, and was walking along the stairs to the third floor. "Hey, how interesting is that place? Can't you just tell me?" Macklin laughed mysteriously, but said nothing, and pointed out the direction of the omniscient tower. Linley was speechless. He stood there, unsure whether to laugh or cry. This old fellow was already advanced in years. How did he suddenly have the interest in mysteries? "Please help, all right? You're not suited for this kind of thing, it'll destroy the obscene image you've spent so hard to build up." Linley followed Macklin into the spell-testing hall, with a stomach full of doubts. The spell-testing hall was bustling with activity these days, probably due to the finals that would commence in a month. Linley followed behind Macklin into the hall, only to see dozens of young mages chatting together in twos or threes. They seemed to be waiting for an empty room. There was nothing they could do. Even with deep pockets like the Alana Guild of Magic, the spell-testing hall could not be built as one wished to. The structure of this thing was too complex and expensive. Take the room where Linley last tested the dragon's eye as example. It was only about 10 square meters, but the building materials had cost over 100,000 gold coins. With the addition of facilities such as the crystal ball and the various inscription processing rooms, it could not be done without at least 500,000 gold coins. Also, this was not something that was paid once and for all. Every time it was used, it had to be maintained by an inscriber. It was considered doable for the Alana Guild of Magic. There were many inscribers in the guild. If it were a guild like the Josus Guild of Magic, there was not even a single decent inscriber that one could find in it. That was a real problem. It probably cost an astronomical amount to hire an inscriber to maintain the hall every year. In Jirian's words, this was the mage profession. Every bit of mana was accumulated by an uncountable sum of money. The Alana Guild of Magic was so large that it was not clear what was the number of mages at each level. Coupled with the sudden influx of trial mages, the spell-testing hall had been overcrowded these days. Linley had heard Mason complain about it upon his return, but he didn't believe it then. Now that he had come, it really seemed as if there wasn't even any space to squeeze in at one glance. Why are there so many people? Linley mused inwardly, and his brows wrinkled involuntarily. There were perhaps no less than 40 or 50 people, including people from the Alana Guild of Magic and the mages who came to participate in the trial. It seemed that they were all waiting for empty rooms. If he had to wait for them to satisfy their needs, wouldn't he have to wait till the night? However, Linley had forgotten one thing. He had forgotten whom he had come with. Who was Macklin? He was the person second only to Aldwin in the Alana Guild of Magic. Even Aldwin had to ask Macklin for advice on some decisions. Did this old man have to join the line in order to use the spell-testing hall? No one had ever heard of it. Besides, even if this old man would observe the order, would the spell-testing hall administrator dare to let him observe it? As soon as the old fellow stepped into the spell-testing hall, a middle-aged magic shooter came up to meet him. He looked respectful and even bowed slightly when he spoke. Felix. Linley watched the two men talk from afar when he suddenly heard someone calling his name from behind. Turning back, he saw Mason and Oren coming from the distance. Mason looked reluctant, and he walked into the spell-testing hall with dawdling footsteps. Although Oren, who was behind him, still had a poker face that had remained unchanged for thousands of years, there was a hint of triumph in his eyes. "Why are you guys here?" Linley was puzzled. Didn't Mason just swear that he wouldn't ever fight Oren again? Had he forgotten about it in just a moment's time? "He had a bet with me and lost." Oren's words were simple as usual. "What bet?" "Don't mention it." Mason shot an angry glare at Oren, and, with much regret, said, "This kid is too cunning. I've accidentally walked into his trap." "So, what you've said in the afternoon doesn't count again?" "It doesn't count. I'm willing to admit defeat. I'll fight this idiot until the end of the month. I'd like to see if he can really fly." Linley watched as Mason clamored, and couldn't help but take pity on him. Although Mason had the strength of a magic shooter at present, he was still far worse when compared with Oren. Moreover, this fellow was too arrogant. He had won against Oren once the day before and had already gotten this cocky. If they really were to fight until the end of the month, wouldn't he be tortured by Oren through and through? Felix, hurry up and come here, stop dawdling there, kid. While the three of them were talking, they heard Macklin yell from a distance. Coming, coming. Felix, what did the old fellow ask you to do? Mason was curious. Linley pursed his lips. The old fellow said he wants to teach me a lesson. Mason and Oren drew in a cold breath almost concurrently. Macklin had been their trial mentor since coming to Alana. From abusing the Phantoma Pantera to entering the Shadowglen, how could they not know the strength of this old fellow after all these encounters? He was a peak Archmage, just one step away from a legendary mage. Even if Felix was any more talented, he was only a magic shooter. The gap between them was as far as the distance between heaven and hell. In such battles, which had a huge disparity in level, tactics and techniques were only minor elements. The old fellow's lesson might really turn into an abuse. For a while, the two guys looked at Linley with sympathy in their eyes. Why? Brother Felix. Mason laid one hand on Lin Li's shoulder and smiled brighter than the flowers. In all conscience, how do I treat you usually? Very good. Lin Li's reply was not perfunctory. Since he came to Alana, his two teammates were arguably the ones who treated him best. Although both of them had strange personalities, one was lewd and the other indifferent, the concern that came out of every little thing couldn't be concealed, and Linley had kept these little things in mind all the time. Then, upon hearing the satisfactory answer, Mason's eyes beamed with delight. Bring us in to have a look? Look at what? Linley was stunned, and could not react for a moment. I'll see how the old fellow advises you. Yes. At Mason's words, even Oren nodded his head at the side. Although the fellow's expression didn't change much, there was a morbid excitement in his eyes. Linley looked at Mason, then at Oren. After hesitating for a moment, he nodded reluctantly. I'll ask the old fellow. The three of them were talking in low voices, and Macklin in the distance could not wait any longer. Hey, can you hurry up? What's the use of dilly-dallying? Do you think I won't teach you a lesson like that? Bloody hell, do you really think you're surely able to teach me a lesson? Linley grumbled under his breath, and then, with a reluctant expression on his face, asked Macklin, Big Brother Mason says they'd like to come along, do you have any objections? No, Macklin replied coolly. There's nothing much today, anyway. I'll teach them a lesson after I'm done with you. Okay. The middle-aged magic shooter respectfully took the four men outside a spacious hall. Mr. Macklin, this is the arena you want. Go and busy yourself. Yes. After the middle-aged magic shooter bade goodbye, the four of them reached out and pushed open the door, and an empty hall came into sight. There was nothing in the hall, neither mysterious magewiths nor sparkling crystal balls were present. It looked like a new house that had yet to be decorated. But when Linley walked into the hall, he could clearly feel that a powerful force was protecting the whole hall. The feeling was very intriguing. He couldn't find the source of the force, yet he could clearly feel that it was there. Macklin introduced the origin of the hall to the three of them as he entered. This is the guild's arena, specially used for battles of archmages. In the past 1,200 years, most of the internal disputes within the Alana Guild of Magic have been settled here. Apart from Aldwin, only I have the right to use it. By the way, look above you, Macklin said, pointing to the heads of the three guys. 12 warlocks' eyes have been fixed here. The battle between the archmages will pass through these 12 warlocks' eyes to every crystal ball in the Alana Guild of Magic. Kid, do you understand what that means? Linley gave a start. What does it mean? It means that if you don't take it seriously and get thrashed too badly by me, you'll be the laughingstock of the whole guild. What's wrong with you? Linley was amused yet annoyed. The old fellow's brain was indeed wired differently from others. He was using a strength nearing that of a legendary mage to bully a trial apprentice, and he was actually relishing it, having the cheek to broadcast such a low-down thing. It's for your own good. Don't you know, to know the things of shame is to be near fortitude? Macklin was especially smug. But, don't worry. I am a person of status, after all. I will not bully you with pure strength. In order to be fair, I will only use a level 15 strength. You sure? Duh, do I not know what you're capable of? It's more than enough to deal with you with a level 15 strength. Then, you can try. Since Macklin was so confident, Linley couldn't say anything more. He took his winter staff out from the ring of endless storm and challenged him. Come on. Two powerful magical waves emanated from both men at the same time. Mason and Oren took a few steps back subconsciously and looked at them with some apprehension. They knew that they were very, very strong all along. One was at the peak of the Archmage realm, and the other young mage was a monster that could not be measured by common sense. But it was only at that moment that they really felt how strong they were. Just the magical waves that emanated from them had forced the two of them back a few steps. As they took in the incomparably strong power, both of them measured themselves up in their hearts. What would be their end if they were to replace them to fight? The result disappointed both of them. If they were to replace either of them, perhaps they wouldn't even be able to release a spell before being turned into ashes by the other party. It would be a complete suppression of strength, without even slightest room for them to resist. Hey, Mason poked Oren, and asked in a very low voice, don't you feel that kid, Felix, has gotten even stronger than before? Duh. While the two were talking, Macklin suddenly moved. There was only a rushed recitation, and a flash of lightning tore open the air. Winding arcs, like golden snakes, surrounded Linley in an instant. F*ck, that old fellow's ruthless, Mason watched, his mouth agape. He'd never imagined that the old fellow would release a cloud storm, which was a level 14 spell, on the first move. With Felix's current strength, it would be a little problematic for him to cope with it. Linley was not flustered at all, despite being under the cloud storm. He had seen the cloud storm back in Josus, and knew the elemental structure of this spell well. He watched Macklin summon the lightning in the sky, but there was no panic in his expression. He merely erected an elemental shield and began a hurried recitation. When the golden snakes fell from the sky, a lightning shield field had surrounded him. Good job, Felix. After breaking through the realm of a magic shooter, Mason's vision had improved drastically. At this time, he could see some subtle things, just like the lightning shield field that was released by Linley at present. The lightning shield field was a level 10 magic spell. It was not a difficult spell to cast, it was especially not a big deal for Felix, who possessed a level 13 strength. But just at that moment, the lightning shield field and the elemental shield were lit up almost at the same time. This also meant that his teammate had unleashed two magic spells concurrently. The gap between releasing one spell and two spells was not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. Not to mention Mason, even Macklin was slightly surprised. As soon as the lightning shield field was lit, Macklin knew that his attack had missed its target. Even 3 cloud storms wouldn't break the elemental shield and the lightning shield field. Not bad. Macklin nodded his head, and there was a little approval in his eyes. Meanwhile, a raging flame was rising above his thin right hand. You flatter me, Linley faked modesty, but his recitation did not stop. While using the protection of the lightning shield field to withstand the heavy bombardment of the thunderstorm, he released a sinister wall of fire at Macklin's foot. The old fellow had to halt his recitation and retreat several steps in a row. In this time, Linley's mana retroaction had been completed. Macklin was halfway through his recitation of the spell and was interrupted by Linley, which almost made him vomit blood in anger. He had ended up in the ditch. He had misjudged the kid's strength from the start, which led to all the wrong steps he'd taken now. Ever since the kid had resisted his cloud storm with the lightning shield field, he had slid into a passive situation that was hard to reverse. This was the case in the battle between mages. A single mistake might change the outcome of a battle. Macklin might not be so upset if it was under ordinary circumstances. After all, he was a character close to the legendary realm. Even if there were minor mistakes occasionally, he could make up for them by means of his powerful strength, but he had no chance at present. His power had been suppressed at level 15, he could not even release a level 16 flame shield. Besides a deeper understanding of the rules and a more sophisticated use of power, Macklin was no better than a magic shooter who had just broken through level 15. Macklin could not help but frown because of the intense pain caused by the bite of mana, and was ultimately shocked by the power his opponent displayed. He could already sense that this was not a power a magic shooter should have. Even if this kid had talent, he could never have such power at the rank of a magic shooter. Hell, an Archmage. An Archmage under the age of 20. Macklin almost lost his mind on the spot. What was the concept of an Archmage below 20? Even in the Dark Ages, the race that considered itself the most perfect under the stars had never had such a genius. On the contrary, there had been a genius like this in the human race less gifted in magic than the High Elves. His name was Josus, the god of mages who defeated the whole magic legion by himself. In the legends of any clans, he existed as a god. Even the human mages had to admit that people like Josus shouldn't appear in Amril. His power was comparable only to that of a true god. Fortunately, there was only one Josus. Macklin's hands were trembling with excitement as he tried desperately to support the elemental shield. He himself was a mage close to the legendary level. How could he not know what the power displayed by Linley meant? Furthermore, this power was not innate, it was built up step by step. Macklin remembered very clearly that, just a month ago, this kid only possessed the strength of a level 12 magic shooter. Macklin even witnessed his breakthrough from level 12 to level 13. Merely a month later, the young mage possessed the strength of an Archmage. Macklin's hands trembled slightly. He had already felt it in his heart, perhaps today's battle would herald the birth of another god of mages. In the meantime, Lin Li's attacks were becoming sharper. Except for the flaming storm having its duration of recitation compressed to the limit, almost all of his attacks were instantaneous spells. These instantaneous spells that Macklin usually did not even bother to look at were extremely frightening at this time. Almost every strike would weaken the elemental shield by 1 point. The innumerable instantaneous spells formed a huge elemental net in the hall, like a boulder that was pressed on Macklin, rendering him breathless. The difficulty of this battle had exceeded Macklin's expectations. He had never been so suffocated as he was presently. The feeling of powerlessness almost drove him crazy. He had an overwhelming advantage, whether in terms of strength or skills, while in terms of experience, that young boy was far from able to catch up with him. However, because of a moment's mistake, he had fallen into passivity for the whole battle. It was to the degree that a level 18 Archmage had to struggle for a little respite in front of a young kid. At a side, Mason and Oren were totally stupefied. They couldn't believe what they saw. They rubbed their eyes hard almost concurrently, trying to see the scene before them more clearly. I'm not mistaken, right? Is that really Felek? Mason was dumbstruck, his eyes glazed. He watched the two men in the battle like they were a mouse fucking an elephant. Yes. Oren's face turned a little pale. He had never thought that his teammate would be this strong. How strong was Macklin? He was a legendary figure. In the whole Alana Guild of Magic, only President Aldwin was slightly stronger than him. In the eyes of trial mages like Oren and Mason, Macklin's strength was at an unimaginable level. Even a finger of his could easily crush them to death. As for challenging Macklin, they did not even think about it. But, at present, Macklin was not only challenged, but also seemed to be in leeward. In the eyes of Mason and Oren, it was as if a dream. Although at the beginning of the battle, Macklin had said that he would suppress his power at level 15. But even a level 15 strength was not what young mages like Mason and Oren could imagine. It was the power of an Archmage, and this power was held in the hands of Macklin. With his skills and combat experience, how could any ordinary Archmage rival him? I must be still asleep. Just as Oren and Mason were appalled by the scene before them, the entire Guild of Magic was in a complete state of tumult. Through the 12 warlocks' eyes at the top of the arena, Every detail of the battle between the two men was transmitted and clearly reflected on each mage's crystal ball. Macklin was second only to Aldwin in the Alana Guild of Magic. No one could remember when this grand old man had had his last battle. When the party of 4 entered the arena, at least half of the mages in the Alana Guild of Magic were speculating about the identities of those young mages, and the reason why Macklin had personally brought them into the arena. Some of the well-informed ones had pulled themselves together, for they knew that these young people were Macklin's apprentices for the trial. They were sure that Macklin had brought them into the arena to show them the ways of magic. Such opportunities were not always available. Even the president of the guild, Aldwin, sat in front of the crystal ball with a smile on his face. Sitting opposite him was Archmage Darien, who had a complex look on his face. Macklin had not been in action for a long time. His strength had long been an unknown secret within the Guild of Magic. Even President Aldwin would like to see how strong the most powerful Archmage was currently. When the cloud storm was released, almost everyone cursed subconsciously, "That old fellow, Macklin, is really mean. He was merely coaching a young apprentice, did he have to dramatize?" He had actually released the cloud storm on the first move. Wasn't it clear that he wanted to end this battle in an instant? However, what happened next almost had their eyes popping out of the sockets. That was because they suddenly saw the so-called young apprentice releasing an elemental shield and supporting a lightning shield field at the same time. With the protection of these two spells, the powerful cloud storm could not affect his spell recitation at all. This detail was too critical. The battle between two mages of the same level was actually about who could recite better, faster, and more completely, and he'd be the one who would win the final victory. There was no doubt that the young apprentice's recitation was faster and more complete, so Macklin fell under the wall of fire, without suspense. When Macklin had to break the spell and retreat in a hurry, some of the mages who were watching through the crystal ball frowned in spite of themselves. Macklin was at a great disadvantage. The spell was interrupted before the mana retroaction had hit him, which meant that the other party could interrupt him again at any time if he wished to. What was the concept of two forced interruptions in a battle? If it were a battle between mages of the same level, these two opportunities were what it would take to decide the outcome of the battle. Fortunately, Macklin was powerful after all. Even if he was only using level 15 strength, it was more than enough to deal with a young apprentice. So, the mages merely frowned, but none of them were worried for Macklin at all. For them, the outcome of the battle was set in stone long ago. Even if the young apprentice had the greatest advantage, it was only a struggle and an episode of the battle. Macklin could end the battle with his strength whenever he wanted. But very soon, they realized that they had guessed it wrong again. The battle continued, and the young apprentice did, as everyone had guessed, gain the upper hand with a mana retroaction. However, Macklin failed to even up the odds with his level 15 strength, and it seemed that his disadvantage was getting worse by the time. Gradually, the mages around the crystal ball began to understand. The young man who was beating up Macklin was not an apprentice at all, he was a real Archmage. "Oh, my God," cries of alarm rang out at the same time in the Alana Guild of Magic. "Archmage!" In the president's room, Aldwin let out an exclamation. He leaned his hunched body slightly forward as if to see the crystal ball clearer. The strength of this young apprentice was beyond his expectation. In the big Alana Guild of Magic, if there was a person who knew best about Linley's strength, it would probably be Aldwin. Although they did not have much contact with each other, and only met a few times altogether, Aldwin was someone who had lived for more than 100 years. Were his experience and vision comparable to those of ordinary people? With his experience and vision, he was able to see many things that others could not. But even with Aldwin's rich experience and sharp vision, he probably could not see that this fellow had secretly attained the strength of an Archmage. This was certainly the last thing that Aldwin had expected. Since the onset of the flaming storm, Aldwin had been staring at the scene in the crystal ball in a daze. After a long time, he sighed. Jirian's luck is really enviable. With Aldwin's insight, how could he not understand what it meant to have an Archmage under the age of 20? This meant that the Josus Guild of Magic would not have to worry about anything for the next 100 years, because another god of mages was likely to be born in this remote little guild. Aldwin looked a little envious when he said this. However, it was just envy. At Aldwin's age, he had come to take things in stride. It could only be said that Jirian was in luck to be able to discover such a magic genius. Compared with Aldwin's composure, Darian, who was sitting opposite him, seemed to have lost it. This is impossible. When Linley suppressed Macklin with a large number of instantaneous spells, the look on Darian's face suddenly changed. His whole face turned ghastly white all at once, and he looked like a cat having its tail stepped on. He jumped up from his chair, waved his hands in exaggeration at the scene in the crystal ball, and screamed, "This is impossible. How could he be an Archmage? He must have cheated." Darian, nothing is impossible. Aldwin had been in charge of the Alana Guild of Magic as early as a few decades ago. How could he not know the feud between Darian and that fat president from Josus? But this was, after all, a personal grudge. Furthermore, one was the president of the Josus Guild of Magic, and the other was the right-hand man he had always relied on, so Aldwin had turned a blind eye all along and pretended not to know anything. Fortunately, Jirian had gone to Josus. There had been little contact between the two men in the past few decades, so there was no occasion for them to expand their grievances. But since Felic's arrival to Josus, the feud of that year seemed to have continued on. Speaking of which, it was also quite a coincidence. Felic, that kid, was a born troublemaker. First, he wounded Darian's trial apprentice, and then he wounded Darian's nephew. After that, Aldwin could vaguely feel that Darian had come to possess great hostility to the young mage. If it was just another mage, perhaps Aldwin would continue to turn a blind eye. After all, although Darian was arrogant and domineering, he would not dare to do anything out of line under his nose. At most, he would only make the other party suffer a little. This could serve as a kind of drill for young mages. But not with Felic. Not to mention the Alana Guild of Magic had to rely on Felic for the bet that'd be due 6 months later, just due to his relationship with Anduin and Old Grim, and the strength he had shown at this time. Aldwin would never allow anyone to lay a hand on the young mage. Are you kidding? Who will take the blame for offending Anduin and Old Grim? Those two old guys are not easy to handle. They can do anything if they really set their minds to it. Even if Aldwin was the only level 21 legendary mage in the Felon Kingdom, he would never provoke these two old guys unless necessary. Moreover, Linley was a genius who had reached the realm of an Archmage before he was even 20 years of age. This genius had gone beyond the region. He belonged not only to the Josus Guild of Magic, but also to the entire Felon Kingdom. As the head of 24 guilds of magic in the Felon Kingdom, Aldwin had the responsibility not to let him come to any harm. No matter what Darian had in his mind or what he had done before, his hostility toward the young mage had to be curbed from now on. Aldwin assumed an unprecedented seriousness and asked, "Darian, how long have you not seen Jirian? If I can, I hope I never have to see that helldamn fool ever again." At Aldwin's mention of Jirian's name, the middle-aged Archmage suddenly showed a look of disgust. His hatred for Jirian had been buried in his heart for decades. That bit resentment back then had already taken root and sprouted into a huge tree, which tormented him all the time. Sometimes, even Darian suspected he'd be forced to go totally crazy one day if he could not find an outlet to vent this hatred. Darian's hateful eyes made Aldwin frown. Facing his right-hand man, he had to consider his words carefully. "There is something I must talk to you about." But before Aldwin could finish a word, he was interrupted by Darian. "President Aldwin, if it's about that fool, I don't think you need to say anything more." Well, Aldwin nodded, and did not try to persuade him anymore. "I don't care about the feud between you and Jirian, but there's one thing I have to tell you." "What is it?" "I don't want to see anything happen to this young man." Aldwin stretched out his bony arm and pointed at the crystal ball, where Linley was displayed reciting his spells at high speed. The eyes he cast on Darian were stern. "Darian, I am not afraid to tell you the truth, this young man is very important to the Alana Guild of Magic. I have offended Wilhelm in order to protect him. If you really intend to put Jirian's account on him, then I don't mind offending another person." Do you understand what I mean? For the few decades that Darien had been in the Guild of Magic, he had never seen Aldwin as serious as he currently was. The venerable president had given people a kind and generous impression all along, but he unexpectedly broke the norm for the young mage today. When those stern eyes swept across his face, Darien even had the illusion that it was the violent Macklin who was standing before him. Darien felt a chill down his spine under Aldwin's gaze. He swallowed his saliva, then uttered, with much difficulty, "You understood. I hope you really understand." Aldwin glanced at his right-hand man and sighed involuntarily. "I already know about your nephew, Madrick. Felix is indeed in the wrong, his attack was too heavy-handed. However, Darien, your nephew should be disciplined as well. He actually had the guts to abuse the trial mage's attendant at will in such an important trial. Does he really think that the other 23 guilds of magic are all empty?" Darien's heart tightened at these words. He knew the incident with Madrick better than anyone else. If it weren't for his behest, Madrick would never dare to abuse a trial mage's attendant. With Darien's acumen, how could he not have guessed that the ins and outs of the matter had already fallen into Aldwin's eyes? The reason why he'd brought it up at the moment was nothing more than to give him a wake-up call. Darien did not dare to be neglectful of the warning. He took the responsibility with a fearful expression. "I'm sorry, President Aldwin, I'm to blame for his lack of proper discipline. I will certainly teach him a good lesson when I get back." "Forget it," Aldwin shook his head. "He has learned his lesson too. Felix was too heavy-handed on him. I'm afraid he will have to lie in bed for months before he can get up, right? At least 3 months. Darien had no children, his nephew, Madrick, was his only relative. Although the latter was stupid, he was, after all, the closest person to him. At Aldwin's mention, he was reminded of Madrick lying miserably in the hospital bed. For a while, he could not help feeling bitter. "Well, Darien, when you go back later, drop by the Research Institute and ask Baron to give you a bottle of psionic potion. Tell him I've sent you." "Thank you, President Aldwin." Darien's face was full of delight. He'd never thought that Aldwin would promise Madrick a bottle of psionic potion. This was the biggest secret of the Alana Guild of Magic. Even among the guild's top officials, only a few people knew about its existence. Only Aldwin and Baron had the right to use it. Even if Macklin wanted to use it, he'd have to apply for it 1 month in advance. "You don't have to thank me," Aldwin shook his head. "This bottle of psionic potion is not for nothing. From today onwards, I don't want to hear any more rumors about you dealing with Felix." "Yes." Darien nodded, and said nothing more. Aldwin's intention was very clear, this bottle of psionic potion was to pacify him. If he refused to accept, then perhaps it'd be another end that awaited him. Although the president had always been kind and generous, he had ruled the Alana Guild of Magic for decades. How could he be someone who was only kind and generous? If Darien really angered him, it was really unknown what sort of means Aldwin would take to deal with him. Furthermore, he had cast the net down as early as 10 days ago. Everything that came after that had nothing to do with him. Even if something really happened to that Josus country boy, Aldwin could hardly pin the blame on him. The guild hall was crowded with people. Everyone's eyes fell on the huge crystal ball. The battle between the apprentice and mentor was clearly displayed in front of everyone through the huge crystal ball. The battle had reached its climax, the young apprentice was getting fiercer with every attack, and the elemental shield on Macklin had become extremely dim. It was still a long way away from the end of the cooldown time for a few crucial spells. Everyone's heart was suspended in the midst of dancing wind blades. This battle had gone far beyond everyone's imagination. When Macklin had activated the warlock's eyes and put the entire arena into the crystal ball, almost everyone thought it would be an actual combat practice. In their imagination, Macklin might use several control spells to make the young apprentice understand the power of control, or he might erect an elemental shield and let the young apprentice bombard him until he ran out of mana before telling him how to distribute his mana rationally. In short, no one had ever thought that the battle would be this intense. The sparks in the battle and the crystal ball flashed, and everyone stood stupefied. There was not a sound in the whole guild hall. Whether it was the archmages who had made a name for themselves for decades, or the mage apprentices who had just come into contact with the mysterious knowledge, all of them were scared into silence at this moment. The battle between the two men was too terrifying. Macklin was indeed someone standing at the peak of the Archmage realm. Although his strength was suppressed to level 15, his spellcasting skills told everyone that he was indeed the most powerful of the archmages in the guild. He had almost perfect mana control and a spellcasting duration that was nearing the limit. The spells released by him were almost as exquisite as fine works of art. In that almost hopeless impasse, he could even take time to retaliate. Many times, people even thought that his spellcasting skills had subverted their common sense. The crowd was even thankful that Macklin had suppressed his strength to level 15 and had fallen into leeward from the beginning. If not for that, they wouldn't be able to witness such an exciting battle in their lifetime. A figure like Macklin, who was at the peak of the Archmage realm, could often destroy everything with his strength alone, so he seldom did his best in a battle, not to mention fighting desperately for a respite with all his skills like now. For the hundreds of mages in the hall, this was simply a stunning magic show. Such opportunities were not always available. Just seeing Macklin doing his best was enough to make them cry out for joy. On top of that, it was a young apprentice, barely 20 years of age, who had forced Macklin into putting in his best. What this young apprentice brought them was a real shock. Compared with Macklin's fine art of casting, what the young apprentice demonstrated was another style. He was accurate and efficient, like a precise machine. His control of mana had reached a terrifying level. It was as if the mana was not an illusory magic power, but the most flexible finger. He had a complete and accurate control over it, and there was neither redundancy nor waste. What made the scalps of the mages tingle the most was that this young apprentice seemed to have an instinctive sensitivity to time. Up to now, each side had released at least dozens of spells. The magnificent runes alone were enough to dazzle everyone's eyes. But this young apprentice clearly remembered the order of each spell and accurately grasped their respective cooldown time. The hundreds of mages in the guild hall had the same idea in their minds. It's horrible. A while ago, Macklin managed to pull through the cooldown time of the elemental shield, and was going to retaliate with this elemental shield when the young apprentice suddenly released a mana retroaction. At that moment, almost everyone saw Macklin open his mouth. That was a sign that he was about to recite a spell. But no one knew what spell had been intending to recite, as the spell was taken by the throat by the young apprentice before it could even be uttered. It was simply a hopeless feeling. The trick was not complicated. Among the hundreds of mages present, those with good vision could see that it was nothing more than calculating the cooldown time of Macklin's elemental shield, and then releasing the mana retroaction just after it. Only under the protection of the elemental shield could Macklin cast his spells boldly and confidently, and that also left an opportunity for the opponent to use the mana retroaction. But things in this world were always easier said than done. How was it an easy thing to calculate the cooldown time of the elemental shield? Not only did he have to remember when the elemental shield was put on Macklin, but also how many magic spells he had released during this period and how much they had weakened the shield. In addition, he had to also take into account Macklin's mana consumption and the pressure he put on him, which could even involve reading the opponent and other subtle factors. The most important thing in the battle of mages was concentration. The recitation of complicated spells was enough to consume the whole focus of most mages. It could only be a rare magic genius that could think and work out exquisite tactics for himself in an intense battle. As for the young apprentice, he could even make complicated calculations when facing his mentor. Not to mention seeing, it was never even heard of. This was not the ability that human beings should possess. All in. The guild hall was so quiet that even a needle could be heard if it fell to the ground. All eyes rested on the crystal ball. They stared in awe at the young apprentice who was reciting the spell. He wasn't reciting the spell swiftly. He seemed to be unhurried, but old mages with sharp eyes could see it at a glance. The young apprentice was reciting the spell as fast as Macklin. Several old mages muttered quietly, "Hell. This was just too damned." No matter how Macklin suppressed his strength to level 15, The spellcasting habit that had been incorporated into his blood would not change. For mages of his level, the spellcasting habit had become an instinct. Even if he'd suppressed his strength to level 1, the duration that a spell should be compressed would not have changed because of the level. It seemed to everyone in the hall that Macklin's compression of recitation time had reached the limit of human beings. They felt that even a legendary mage could not do it better than Macklin. But right under their noses, there was at present a young apprentice under the age of 20 who had done something only Macklin could do. No one dared to believe that this young apprentice was barely 20. Everyone began to speculate about the origins of this apprentice-looking fellow. For a moment, whispers rose one after another in the guild hall. Someone spoke from the crowd, "I remember, this fellow seems to be from Josus." When this sentence was uttered, a voice of disapproval was immediately aroused, and an old magic shooter with white beard said agitatedly, "Nonsense. How can a place like the Josus Guild of Magic produce such an impressive genius?" "Exactly, it's impossible." Several colleagues around him looked at him and nodded in the same way. This had to be a joke. A magic genius who could drive Macklin to the wall came from Josus? Who didn't know that place was a backwater of magic? It had had only one Archmage, Girion, in decades. The most ridiculous thing was that people had said that the most powerful magic strength in that place was not the Guild of Magic, but a dozen of mage families from all over the place. Such a genius came from Josus? It'd be more straightforward to say that Macklin was a woman. If this kid really comes from Josus, I'll eat this crystal ball. The white-bearded old magic shooter pointed excitedly at the crystal ball in front of him. The mage who'd told the truth became mum at once. Wouldn't it be murder if the old man were to eat such a huge crystal ball? Furthermore, although he had said that this kid came from Josus, he was actually not certain of it. Everyone knew about that countryside place, Josus. They'd long be celebrating if they could produce a magic shooter, let alone an archmage less than 20 years of age. Perhaps he mistook him for another. The only mage who'd spoken the truth began to doubt himself. The battle was coming to an end when the crowd was talking and speculating about Linley's origins. Boom. 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 3 rings of fire exploded beside Macklin in series, leaving behind only a thin layer of the crumbling elemental shield. "Kid, you've got guts." The 3 rings of fire, which had been buried long ago, exploded at the most crucial moment and immediately pushed Macklin to the brink of despair. There was only a thin layer of elemental shield on his body, and perhaps only a wind blade was all it would take to break it. Moreover, it was only half past the cooldown time. It'd be like asking a rooster to lay eggs for Macklin to put up another elemental shield. Macklin had lived for a long time, and it was a first for him to find himself in such a mess. He was too aggrieved being beaten by a young kid barely 20 years of age, without even having the strength to fight back. The elemental shield was about to be torn, he was about to be sentenced to death, yet he couldn't do anything about it. He could only watch as the other party cast spells after spells on himself. It's such a miserable failure. Macklin was utterly regretful at present. He shouldn't have underestimated this boy, thinking that he was still at the same strength a month ago. He did not expect that the kid would break through from level 13 to level 15, advancing to the realm of the Archmage in such a short period of time. However, this boy was also a talent. A slight advantage was constantly enlarged by him, and eventually pushed Macklin to the brink of despair. Taking the opportunity of passing Macklin, Linley whispered in his ear, "See, I've said. It's uncertain who'd be the one lecturing whom." Upon hearing this, Macklin nearly vomited blood in anger. Unfortunately, vomiting blood was one thing, there was still nothing he could do. Just as the two passed each other, the flaming hands had fallen on Macklin's back, the flames rose at once, burning a huge gap in the elemental shield in an instant. "It's over." Macklin's heart sank as he felt the heat from the flaming hands. "The name I've made for myself for decades will be destroyed in this kid's hands today." At the thought of the 12 warlocks' eyes above him, Macklin really wanted to die. At this moment, the entire Guild of Magic fell into silence. Whether it was Aldwin or Darien, or the hundreds of mages in the guild hall, everyone was nervous as they stared at the crystal ball. When they watched Lin Li's flaming hands fall, and then Macklin's elemental shield break open, even time seemed to have frozen at the moment, and then, they saw it. The blazing flame on the young apprentice's hand was extinguished in an instant. The runes dancing about in the arena suddenly disappeared, and everything seemed to return to the time when the party of 4 just entered. Everyone in the Guild of Magic was stunned. Nobody expected this to be the final outcome. What kind of situation was this? In the guild hall, someone shouted out, "Darn, the kid has exhausted his mana." His mana was exhausted, indeed. It was not until this time that this group of mages in the guild hall suddenly remembered that the young apprentice had released at least dozens of spells during the battle just now, of which at least half were at the level of a magic shooter. For a moment, all the mages in the hall showed the same look of sudden enlightenment. No wonder they'd constantly felt that something was amiss. So, this was what happened. The reason why this kid looked so fierce was that he had been overdrawing his mana. What was the concept of dozens of spells? This meant an astronomical amount of mana. Even those well-known archmages could not necessarily withstand such a consumption, let alone a young man under the age of 20. It was indeed so when they recalled the battle process. Ever since the young mage apprentice had gained the upper hand, he had been bombarding Macklin with spells. A large amount of instantaneous spells, in addition to the short recitation, had forced Macklin out of breath, but at the same time he was also overdrawing his own mana. This battling style that was almost similar to a gamble finally had a disastrous effect on him. Just when victory was within reach, his mana was completely exhausted. What a pity, bursts of sigh ensued from the crowd. Even the mages unrelated to the young mage apprentice felt regretful for him. It was so close. If the flaming hands were to burn a second longer, it'd be enough to defeat Macklin completely. Unfortunately, this 1 second had become a goal that he could not reach. Macklin was a level 18 magic shooter. How many times could a mage defeat him in his life? In the president's room, Darian quietly let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, this Josus kid might be powerful, but it was not to an unreasonable extent. At least he could not compete with an Archmage in terms of mana yet. This put Darian somewhat at ease. He took a mental note of it. Insufficient mana was the biggest flaw of the opponent. Aldwin merely chuckled. Looks like Macklin's in luck. President Aldwin, I'm afraid it's not just luck. Oh? Aldwin glanced at Darian in puzzlement. Darian, you beg to differ? Yes, President Aldwin. Darian nodded. He pointed to Linley, who was in the crystal ball, and said, if my guess is right, this was all in Mr. Macklin's grasp. He knew the limit of the other party's mana right from the start, so he has been defending all along. It was all to let the young man exhaust his mana and to make him understand the importance of distributing the mana. Looks like you still don't understand, Aldwin gave a chuckle, and did not continue. Forget it. Darian, if there's nothing else, you may go back. I'd like to be alone. Yes. Darian took another look at the scene in the crystal ball, before retreating from the room respectfully. He walked along the corridor in the direction of the research institution. He was in a good mood on the way. He was about to get his hands on the psionic potion, and he had a clear grasp of the Josus boy's strength. The kid exhausting his mana at the very end had put Darian's heart at ease. As long as he was not a real Archmage, there was still a chance to deal with him. The battle, which had far exceeded everyone's imagination, finally came to a close as Darian entered the research institution. The scene on the crystal ball gradually faded and returned to its original at last. And, at this time, Macklin was flying into a rage. The old fellow recited a spell with a livid expression, and the 12 warlocks' eyes above were switched off. When he turned around, he looked as if he was about to devour someone alive. Damn it, you have the guts to claim you've exhausted your mana? Why? Linley was still unhurried. Why can't I exhaust my mana? Cut the act with me. Others might not know you, but I do. Seeing how lifeless Linley looked, Macklin couldn't resist the urge to send a kick in his direction. Damn it, monsters like you should be dragged into the slaughterhouse. Exhausted your mana? To hell with it. Why didn't you exhaust your mana when you were dealing with the three-eyed blood wolf in the Nightmare Mountains? Why didn't you exhaust your mana in the Shadow Glen? Yet you've exhausted your mana while fighting me, is there such a coincidence? Linley scratched his head, and answered shamelessly, there'd be times when one is down on luck. I was unlucky this time. My mana was exhausted too fast. Alright? Macklin almost vomited blood. Exhausting one's mana is dependent on luck? Did you come up with your own theory? Forget it. I don't want to badger with you anymore. Macklin realized that if they were to compete to see who was better in telling bald-faced lies, he'd never catch up to this kid. It wasn't that he didn't know how to lie, the main reason was because his skin wasn't as thick as the kid's. The latter was absolutely shameless, he was always ready to lie through his teeth, regardless of whether the words made sense. You just tell me honestly, why did you go easy on me? When did I go easy on you? Fuck, you're still denying? Macklin was infuriated. As someone at the peak of his profession, he had long been indifferent to the outcome. Winning was certainly worth rejoicing, but losing wasn't a big deal either. Losing before the whole guild was only a momentary embarrassment, he still had to do what he had to do after the embarrassment passed. What really angered him was that he had won the battle, which seemed to be won with a great disparity in strength, due to his opponent deliberately going easy on him. Macklin was utterly furious at the thought of this. It was plainly a slap in the face for him. He could have exhausted his mana any time, but he had to do it before the flaming hands was about to come down. Didn't that mean, old man, don't be happy just yet, I'm just going easy on you? Fuck, this was simply unbearable. Furthermore, others didn't know about him, but it didn't mean that Macklin himself wasn't clear about his background. Since the kid came to Alana, Macklin had been his trial mentor. From the Phantom Panthera to the three-eyed blood wolf, he had paid close attention to both battles. He had not found any problems with the kid's mana from the start. In those two battles, the kid acted like a perpetual motion machine with infinite mana. Spells were released one after another every time he opened his mouth, and there was never a moment that he was seen worrying about his mana. He looked like he had abundant mana at any time, such that Macklin had even suspected the kid had brought along the recovery potion. Although the battle was exciting, it was far less intense as compared to when the party of three had encountered the three-eyed blood wolf in the Nightmare Mountains. There were hundreds of them, killing a dozen of them with a spell would be tiresome, not to mention there was a mighty king wolf with them. He hadn't exhausted his mana under those circumstances, how could he have exhausted it earlier on? Alright, Linley didn't dare to spout crap anymore, seeing that he had really ruffled Macklin's feathers. He merely nodded, and said vaguely, I do have some mana left. As for how much the sum was, Linley couldn't explain it. Anyway, a little and a lot both meant infinite to him. Although Macklin had already guessed the truth, he was still livid when he heard Linley admit it personally. His angry howl almost flipped the guild's roof. Damn it, you had better tell me the truth. Why did you go easy on me? Did you think I was an unworthy opponent? Macklin's words were somewhat serious, Linley dared not treat them lightly. He hurriedly shook his head in denial. No, don't misunderstand it. The reason why I held back was not because of you. Why is that so? Linley looked at the 12 warlocks' eyes above him. It was because I wanted to deceive someone. Macklin was stunned. Deceive whom? This is a secret, Linley smiled, but did not continue. Grinning, he merely said, anyway, don't worry. I didn't go easy on you on purpose. Really? Macklin glanced at him skeptically, but chose to believe him at last. After all, he really couldn't think of any reason for the other party to go easy on him. To save me from embarrassment? Are you kidding? Macklin knew this kid well enough to know that he wouldn't do something so kind with this character of his. Of course. Linley replied in all seriousness. Forget it, it's no use asking you. Macklin stared at him for a long time. Finally, he shook his head and gave up. Not a word coming from this kid's mouth was true. Even if he said that the sun rise from the east, he was most likely trying to figure out how to get the sun to the west. F***ck, none of the mages from Josus are good stuff. Macklin cursed in his heart. He shifted his eyes to Mason and Oren, looking like a big wolf eyeing two white bunnies. What? What do you want? Mason was slightly intimidated by Macklin's gaze. Kid, I've heard that you've broken through the realm of a magic shooter? Macklin had an amicable smile on his face, which made him look like a kind elder. Not bad, young man, much better than your disappointing Uncle Morris. You flatter me. This is all your good teaching. Mason was flattered by Macklin's compliment, such that even a shameless person like him could not help but be humbled. His words were modest, but he couldn't hide the smug smile on his face. I thought so too. Macklin nodded, and said shamelessly, I seem to be doing a good job as a mentor. Mason, it's still early today, how about I give you some pointers? The smile on Mason's face froze. He really wanted to slap himself. Talk more. Curry more favor. Now you've gotten yourself into trouble. Fuck, I'm really done for. The old fellow had just suffered a great defeat in Felix's hands. He would probably take the chance to vent it all on Mason. Mason really wanted to die. He wasn't that monster Felix. It'd be brutal abuse if he fell into Macklin's hands. In addition, the old man was on fire. It'd be his luck if he could live after the abuse. Why? Macklin was a little upset when he saw Mason dilly-dally. Does magic shooter Mason think that I'm not qualified to give you pointers? No. Mason was nearly out of his wits at the old fellow's words. That was the most powerful Archmage here. Mason wouldn't dare to say that the latter wasn't qualified to advise him even if he was given 100 times more guts. Mason was too distressed to think about how he'd be abused, he could only bite the bullet and walk over. I'll do a good job, Macklin said through gritted teeth. It was a battle without suspense. Although Macklin once again suppressed his power, it was still effortless for him to deal with Mason. He completely grasped the rhythm of the whole battle with only a mana retroaction. He could easily bring Mason down as he wished. However, with the old fellow's sinister mind, how could he bear to end the battle so quickly? The repeated abuse and devastation were halted just as Mason was about to lose. This cat-and-mouse game was extremely childish, but Macklin was having a wonderful time with it, despite his old age. Not to mention the battered Mason, even the two spectators at the side could not help dozing off. Linley only took a few glances, and quickly lost interest in the cat-and-mouse game. In the end, he didn't even pay attention to what the two fellows were doing, because all his thoughts were on the previous battle. Once a character of Macklin's level was forced to show all his abilities, it'd undoubtedly be a very scary thing. Every detail and skill was worth studying. The whole battle flashed through Lin Li's mind over and over again. Every spell that was cast by both sides was broken up and contrasted repeatedly. Almost every comparison made Linley marvel at Macklin's strength. This old man was indeed a character who was approaching the legendary level. His skills could be described as almost perfect. If it weren't for the huge mistake Macklin had made at the beginning and Linley's abnormal mental strength, he would most likely have been the one who lost the battle. The experience accumulated over decades was not something that could be explained in a sentence. Spellcasting was purely an instinctual habit for an old monster like Macklin. There was no need for thought nor measure. He only needed to control his mana. Perhaps Macklin did not even spare a moment of thought for which spells he should release. It was purely a subconscious act, doing the most appropriate thing at the most appropriate time. This was Linley's conclusion to the previous battle. This was perhaps the most ideal state for a mage. Linley knew that he was still far from this state. To the onlookers, Linley's casting speed was not slower than Macklin's, and his response to various situations was also reasonable. Even in many cases, he could also release some seemingly powerful and unconstrained spells. The hundreds of mages in the guild hall had thoroughly enjoyed the spectacular battle style. Only Linley himself knew that the reason why he could reach such a level was solely his superior mental strength. It was because of the support of his abnormal mental strength that he could risk the bite of mana and minimize the duration for reciting the spells so that he could divide at least half of his attention to analyze every change in the battle and come up with the most appropriate response. One was intentional, and the other was otherwise. The result was obvious upon comparison. However, Linley wasn't discouraged at all. He knew that he'd be able to attain the near-ideal state one day. In fact, it was not difficult to reach this state. To sum up, it was nothing more than repetition. Countless repetition, repeated practice and repeated battles, would turn magic into a habit and an instinct. Linley wasn't unfamiliar with this feeling. It was just like the various professions he was proficient in. Once reaching a certain level, it would naturally become an instinct, such as pharmaceutics. Linley had not sorted out the formulas he had mastered for a long time. He even forgot how many kinds of formulas he had mastered. But once he started to prepare the potion, he was able to clearly know how much of the herbs should be used and how high the temperature should be. It was often the case. There was no need to think about it at all. He could simply put his hand into the ring of endless storm, and the herbs needed for the potion would be out. It was the same for alchemy, inscription, and forging. This was probably what was meant by a skill approaching the practice of Tao. Linley had to admit that the benefits gained from this battle had far exceeded his estimate. These benefits could not enhance his strength, but could point out the right direction for Linley. Boom! A muffled thud sounded out of the blue. Linley lifted his head up in confusion, and realized that Macklin was done with giving pointers, or rather, abusing Mason. The old guy fellow was really out of his mind. After playing the game of cat and mouse, he still refused to let Mason go. The last spells he'd used to end the battle was the mud spell and the blind spell, which got Mason fumbling blindly in the mud, all the while swearing. Linley rolled his eyes. The old fellow really had nothing to do. At this time, Oren suddenly asked, "Felix, didn't you want to go to the Omniscient Tower?" "When did I?" Linley was puzzled. When did he say he'd go to the Omniscient Tower? However, he quickly understood and swallowed back the words he was about to utter. Instead, he said, right. Are you free?" "I don't have much to do." "I'll go with you. Then we'll go together." Both of them were talking in all seriousness. Even Mason, who was currently blind, couldn't listen any longer. "Hey, you two, wait for me." "Get out of here." Macklin was in a better mood after abusing Mason. He released a dispelling magic to relieve Mason's blindness, and said to Linley, "But don't forget, you have to go to the Pharmacists' Guild the day after tomorrow." "Got it," Linley nodded. He'd remember even if Macklin had not reminded him. He had heard of its name for a long time, and finally got a chance to visit. He wouldn't pass up the opportunity to go to the Pharmacists' Guild. The three of them walked out of the arena, only to find that it was brimming with people. "What is this?" Linley gave a start. He clearly remembered there had only been a few dozen people outside when he'd entered the arena. Where had these hundreds of people come from? "I reckon they must be here to see who had thrashed the old fellow," Mason whispered at a side. Oren nodded in rare agreement with Mason. "Surely not." Linley swallowed his saliva, feeling somewhat intimidated. Then, he realized that Mason wasn't wrong. As soon as Linley stepped out, all eyes were on him. They were full of admiration, doubt, and speculation. There was also much whispering and finger-pointing. Linley felt like a tiger in the zoo, being discussed about and judged by a group of tourists. To be honest, this was not a pleasant feeling. However, there was nothing Linley could do. They had merely wanted to have a look. Surely he couldn't cover himself up so as not to let them see? "Please give way." Linley could only bury his head and squeeze his way out of the crowd. Fortunately, the crowd was cooperative. The crowd conscientiously parted when Linley walked past, clearing a path for him to walk through. But the discussion never stopped as they cleared the way for Linley. Although the voices were very soft, hundreds of people whispering at the same time turned the quiet hall into a bustling market at once. After escaping from the commotion, Linley found that he still received no less attention. As he walked to the guild hall, almost every mage Linley met seemed to cast strange looks on him. See, that's Felic, from Josus. So he's Felic. I hear that he won against Mr. Macklin. Is that true? Of course it's true. He may look normal now, but I heard that when he was battling with Mr. Macklin, he grew 3 heads, and they all recited the spells at the same time. He had 8 arms too, each holding a staff. Why else do you think he was able to defeat Mr. Macklin at such a young age? 3 heads and 8 arms? Isn't that like Naga? MHM. This is the guild's secret. You'd better keep it to yourself. I see. Linley didn't know whether he should be amused or annoyed as the discussions reached his ears. Looks like we can't go to the Omniscient Tower anymore. The 3 of them walked all the way to the guild hall. Linley had no intention to go to the Omniscient Tower any longer. He could even think with his knees how the people in the Omniscient Tower were discussing about him having 3 heads and 8 arms. He'd be seeking discomfort if he were to go there now. You should leave and hide outside until the limelight passes. Anyway, you know what these fellows are like too. They've been cooped up in the guild, and have become perverse after holding back for so long. Any small movement would go out of hand through them, like that fool, Matthias, the last time. Mason words hung in mid-sentence, for he suddenly saw the fool that he was talking about heading towards the guild hall. Matthias had spotted them long ago. He had not stepped out of the Guild of Magic for the whole day, so how could he be unaware of the battle between Macklin and Linley? However, he was more in shock than the other mages. The fellow who was battling with Macklin shouldn't have been here. Matthias was dumbfounded when the scene was transmitted into the crystal ball. He couldn't figure out why this darn Josus country boy could appear in the guild. He had sent Argus to the Fire Plume Ridge. Argus was a true Archmage, who could easily handle 10 trial apprentices all at once. Could it be that even Argus had failed to kill him? Matthias was flustered at the thought. Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.